Welcome back to the Interior Analysis Podcast. I'm your host for this episode, Jelani T. Kelly.
I'm Evan Westman.
And Angel Michele.
So for this episode, we will be discussing Man of Steel. Finally. I mean, we've had this on the docket for a few years now, but we're finally getting to it with the Superman. It was originally called Superman Legacy, but it's just Superman now. The James Gunn Superman movie coming out this year. 2025. But we're discussing Man of Steel today, originally released in 2013, directed by Zack Snyder, written by David S. Goyer, Christopher Nolan, didn't realize that, and Jerry Siegel, starring Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, Michael Shannon, Lawrence Fishburne, Diane Lane, Kevin Costner, Russell Crowe, and a bunch more names. The budget was $225 million. I mean, clearly a lot of money was put. You can see all of the money put on screen. It grossed only $291 million domestically, but over $670 million worldwide. So the rest of the world liked this movie more than the U.S., I guess. But that's also a lot more countries.
Yeah.
And people.
I feel like that's a fairly standard balance for like a movie like this in terms of foreign domestic.
Yeah, stuff like this works well overseas, I feel like.
I think I've only seen this movie fully once or twice. My first time was definitely in the AMC, not sponsored, theaters at one of my local malls. I was in my junior year of high school. I don't remember the second time I saw this fully, so it's possible I never saw this fully a second time. So this is around my second or third time fully watching it through. And I still love it. I'm not sorry. I love the CGI action. Well, before I even get into this, there's more initial stuff I have here. What are your guys' first experiences in general with this movie?
Angel, I'll let you start with that.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of funny because I don't really remember the experience initially because this also came out when I was in high school. I think 2013. I would have been like about 17, probably a little before because I think this came out in May. So I don't really remember like going to see it, but it was one of those things where like back then I definitely did go see this in theaters because that's just kind of what I always did. Like I always made sure to go see like superhero tentpole stuff in theaters. I've probably only seen it like 2 or 3 times also, just like you, Jelani, like in full. I've seen clips of it all the time, like bits and pieces. There's like scenes that I like all the stuff with his parents, like the flashback stuff. I like a lot of the fight scenes and stuff like that. So I tend to watch like clips of it every now and then, but like as far as fully watching it, probably only 2 or 3 times. Like sadly, I've seen Batman v Superman probably more times than I have seen this film, which makes me very sad because this film is
We're sad too.
It's really, really good. I mean, when it first came out, I was definitely on that hype train of like the dark and gritty superhero reboots and takes because of this was like also the tail end of Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. Like TDKR had just come out like the year before, and I was huge into that. So when I saw that they were basically going to be doing the same thing for Superman, I was like all in. And then I saw it, and it was pretty good. It was fun. I enjoyed watching it. I like Henry Cavill as Superman. I still do. So yeah, I think he brings a lot more subtle emotionality to the role than a lot of people think, which I appreciate. Like I said, I really like a lot of the scenes with his parents and stuff like that. I have some stuff to say on that, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, we all do, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we all definitely have stuff to talk about with the flashbacks, like both positive and negative, but like I especially like the scenes with his mom. I really, really like the scenes with Jor-El. I think that they work really well. Lets out some of that subtlety that I was just talking about. But yeah, no, it's a good time, and I definitely want to get into a habit of like watching this and probably a couple of the other DCEU movies like more often than I have been because like they're fun to revisit, but also like I feel like there's a coolness to like not letting them fall by the wayside, just letting myself be like, oh, I'm just gonna just randomly watch Man of Steel because I like it.
I did that with Winter Soldier. I think I've said that before, like 2 or 3 times on this podcast. But yeah.
Oh yeah, well, Winter Soldier is probably still the best MCU movie to me. I've seen that one like 5 or 6 times a minimum.
I think that's top 3, up there with Infinity War and Black Panther for me, I think.
Yeah. It's definitely, like, I think it's usually in, I don't know if it cracks my top 5, but I think it's usually in, like, most lists that I see in the top 5.
Yeah, if we have time, I'd love to hear your guys' like top EU movies too, because I feel like everyone's ranking is a little bit different. It kind of depends on what you're into. This is definitely in my top three, I think. And then there's a couple other ones too. There's
The
like
Suicide Squad
I
is top three.
I like Zack Snyder's Justice League. I do like Suicide. I do like both Suicide Squads, which I know is a hot take, but I do
You
like
like
both
both?
of them. I like
Hmm.
both of them. The new one is vastly better, but I do like both of them. I remember like I came out of the theater and I had a really good time because I saw that. I think it was at Universal Studios or something. Like I was on vacation when it came out in theaters, so I just went and I saw it with my family, and we all liked it. In hindsight, it's not the best, but it's still fun.
Okay. Evan, you're
I guess to kind of pair with the question you just posed, I think the only, if we're counting the DCEU as like stuff that is connected, I think this is number two to Wonder Woman. Uh, and
Wonder
then,
Woman, I forgot about. I'm a
yeah,
bad
I
person.
don't know
yeah, that's
what
up there.
number three would be. I also don't care. I don't enjoy them enough. I would say, I know this one doesn't count. I have kind of had the Matt Reeves, Robert Pattinson Batman movie. I tried that again a few months ago. That has grown on me a lot.
I thought you liked it.
Yeah, I
I
did
never
too.
disliked it, but I think I didn't like give it its flowers like out the theater. I was like, that was fine. But then I rewatched it, I was like, no, this is pretty damn good. Like it might be my favorite Batman movie actually. But that's not what we're talking about, so I shouldn't talk about that. With
It's
this,
relevant to the conversation though.
yeah, I mean, we might get into that with like where the DC universe is going, but let's maybe save that for the end when we talk about our predictions. So I kind of jumped the gun there. Uh,
Ha!
oh yeah, I heard that like right after I said it. Again, I swear it's not intentional. So I did see this in theaters. I was more anticipating because I had like in the year before this came out become a huge fan of Hans Zimmer. And I didn't care about this movie, but I saw he was doing the score, so I think before I saw it, I probably listened to a few of the tracks on it. I was like, okay, this is a great Hans Zimmer score. I think it's still probably in my top three that he's done.
Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah. Why does he like he always brings the sauce, but why does he always make it absolutely the best for the most like mid movie, like the
It's
most
solely for
frustrating
you.
movies?
It's solely for you, Evan.
He needs to write a score for me just brushing my teeth, just so my mornings are exciting.
I mean, you can just play like the Batman theme while you're brushing your teeth, or the Inception theme, or this, and it just
Interstellar.
feels more dramatic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Interstellar's good because I guess you're going to bed usually, and it's a little bit more, a little bit sleepier. I don't think I normally would have seen this movie. It was kind of in the middle of my family moving from Arizona to Rhode Island, and we like hadn't gotten into
That's
our
a shift.
yeah, it was quite a shift. I think we were up in Maine, I want to say, visiting one of my aunts because we just like weren't able to move into our new house yet. And there was just a random day where we were like, all right, we're going to go to the movies. What's out? Monsters University. All right, the younger girls will go to that and the guys will go to Superman. And I actually like Monsters University better now that I've seen it a couple times.
He's pretty good.
Yeah, I actually want to cover that someday. But I remember walking out of the
I've
theater.
never seen them.
Yeah, well, we should fix that because they're both pretty good.
You've
I
seen
think
Monsters Inc. though, right?
No.
No, he hasn't.
No.
I think this has come up before. Yeah, so I was 14 when I saw it, and I didn't love it. I remember walking out of the theater and being like, I feel like I just watched somebody play Smash Bros. For 2 hours in regards to the action. I've warmed up to the action a bit more over time, but that was kind of new. Like, I feel like we hadn't seen the, like, that style of superhero action yet, because, you know, the Batman movies are all pretty grounded, and the MCU at that time was still, because I'd seen Avengers at that point, and it was still, you don't have stuff moving like 1,000 miles an hour.
It was a
in
Dragon
that
Ball Z
movie.
fight.
I think I've heard that comparison, and I take people's word for it.
That's why I love it.
Only two other notes. This is kind of random, but like, strangely, at the time this came out, a lot of the bands I was listening to all had like a Superman themed song. Three Doors Down has Kryptonite. Daughtry has, I think this came out after, but Daughtry has Waiting for Superman. Five for Fighting has that one song that I feel like that's the best known of them. And REM also has a Superman song.
Eminem literally has a song called Superman.
Oh, well, 14-year-old me hated Eminem. and current me still isn't really a fan. So I haven't
Everyone's
listened to that
entitled
song. I like
to
Venom.
their
I like his
opinion.
Venom song. That's
like
about it.
one of his most hated songs.
Yeah, that's
Well,
like I enjoy
I
it
like
just because
it.
it's
But,
funny.
yeah.
I think it's funny because I also wasn't I watched Venom and I wasn't expecting Eminem to just show up, and then he just did, and I'm like, oh, this is great. I still listen to it. It's great.
Yeah, I have it. It's in my playlist. I like
I
it.
think when I first heard people talking about it, I thought he had like written it before, and it was just like getting a resurgence. And then I found out later, like, no, he wrote it for it. I don't know if that was a good choice. I shouldn't talk about Eminem because I don't know enough about it. Anyway, my final note. This might be very stupid, and I might cut it, but I think it's really funny to think about the person coming up with the name for Superman. The way that I imagine it is this is definitely not how it happened. But I imagine this guy in the 1920s smoking like the fattest cigar you've ever seen, and like sitting in an office with all his drawings,
Looking like
and
Perry White.
sure, looking like Perry White, and he's like he's got everything else figured out. He's like, this is a pretty great character I've got here, but I think I need a name for him. So, let's see. He's a man, obviously, because it's the 30s, and, well, I'm a man, so, you know. But he's got some pretty incredible supernatural ability. Oh, that could be something. Oh, a Superman.
How did you add the voice filter to your voice? It sounded like you had. It sounded like you were speaking in black and white.
Well, that might just be digital distortion on your end. It probably won't sound. I mean, I could add that in post, probably. I don't know. It's really stupid, but I just think it's really funny to think that that was the last thing that he came up with, like, all the backstory and everything, all the powers, even the suit, and he just, like suddenly it dawns on him.
The names of some of these old characters are not something I knock against them, though, because they're easily memorable, easily written, easily memorized, easily said by any language, any age. There are little kids who can barely speak that can say Superman. Like, I mean, it's great marketing. I don't know what to call it. Like, when you have like a simple name like that, like,
it's kind of
Batman.
archetypal, I feel like.
Yeah.
Maybe, is the word.
I have more notes.
Yes,
so I'm
please
go
get into them.
that.
Cool. Yeah, do it.
I love the CGI action because how the hell else were they supposed to film it? Like, no other Superman movie has done what this movie has done at this point. I'm sure Gunn Superman will. I mean, we already see moments like that in the trailer. But, like, the only thing I remember, the only one I've seen other than this one, the only other Superman movie I've seen other than this one was Superman Returns. And I don't think he even fights anybody in that. I think the only scenes I remember from it are him lifting the Kryptonite Island, which was dope, and the bank robbery scene where he gets shot in the eye and the bullet bounces off of his eye. Also dope. People have called it boring, and I haven't rewatched it, but I've seen like reviews and stuff of it on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, there wasn't much that happened in this.
I guess we should have asked that from the outset. How many versions of Superman do you guys know? Because this is the only one I know. I haven't seen any other version, unless you count like Lego Superman, which I don't.
No.
I
know
seen, like,
of
the
other
cartoons
versions
and stuff, guys. Like,
No.
like the DCAU. No, none of that.
Not. I mean, I've like
sparsely.
seen that happen. Like I've happened to buy it in or even like in Space Jam 2. Like there's a cartoon Superman that shows, but like that doesn't count.
Sparsely, like whenever it was on Cartoon Network. Is that when those shows?
Yeah,
were on?
it was like Cartoon Network. Like it was one of those like Saturday morning cartoon type slots a lot of the time.
I meant to sit down and watch all of the old animated stuff. I just haven't. I tried to start with Justice League, and I didn't get past like episode 2. I have seen the movies, a bunch of the animated movies, so that's as familiar as I get with him. You can name any of the animated DC. I've seen Death of Superman, all of them, any of the DC animated stuff. Like most of those I've seen.
That's a good one. Yeah, I guess I've seen like the most versions thing because like I watched I watched Superman the movie finally a couple years ago, the one with Christopher Reeve. I watched Smallville growing up.
Oh yeah.
I was really into the like Justice League cartoons and things like that. Justice League is actually, I didn't think about it until you were saying something, but it is actually a difficult hump to get over because they have a lot of double episodes, like a lot of double and triple episodes. So it's not like you're watching it and like, oh, in 20 minutes you know what the whole show is going to be like. Like no, they actually have most of their episodes are like are like longer arcs that kind of stitch together. And it's cool, but it's also like I could understand why like a young kid might lose interest if they're not like binging it. You know
I had
what
an
I mean?
action figure though, based off of from the cartoon.
I've seen a lot of versions of the, and I feel like they have a lot of staying power. Like just those character designs, like you were saying, like you had an action figure, right?
Mhm.
Like that, like they have a lot of staying power. Those specific designs of the characters, especially Superman, and I feel
Mhm.
like it's influenced a lot of like the stuff that came later. Like I've been watching My Adventures with Superman lately. I feel like there's a good amount of like similarities in how he's presented. They try to go very, very human with him in a way that they also did in like the Superman the animated series and like Justice League and stuff like that, like Batman Beyond. So yeah, I've seen a lot of different versions. I don't know if this one is like Man of Steel specifically is like in my top, but I do really like the way that they tried to go about this too, like for its own as its own thing.
And this was supposed to be an entire. I won't get into the all of the details because I don't remember all of them. But this was supposed to like Snyder had an entire vision up until the end of this version of his DCEU that saw this Superman turning evil at some point and working for Darkseid because Lois dies. So that vision that Batman saw does come to pass eventually, and Superman's like evil, wearing a black suit, all of that. So he did have a direction for this, and it's possible him knowing where he wanted this to end up influence a lot of how this movie, how we went about this movie. So
Yeah, now that you say that, that does kind of recontextualize some of what they do with him here. I feel like there maybe are seeds planted there.
Especially a lot of the Zod stuff, like a lot of the fights and stuff, like the way that he goes about fighting in general. I feel like there's definitely hints of where the darker direction they wanted him to go in a way that I don't know that they necessarily do with another Superman.
I'm not gonna say he was Injustice Superman, which is as much as they're hated. I didn't know Injustice was as hated as it is as far as characterization for specifically Superman and Wonder Woman. But
Is it?
yeah, it's really hated. It's what got me back into superhero stuff in general, especially comics. Like, it was, and I've said this before tons of times on the podcast, but it was also the unpredictability of that verse as far as, one, the most powerful superhero of all time being the villain. That's scary. Two, the excitement of turning a page and not knowing whether or not this character you were following in the story was about to die. And that happened a lot throughout the series. They weren't going with, like, not exactly like an Injustice Superman where he just becomes evil, but there's similarities there, because in Injustice he turns evil because Joker hits him with
kills
like
Lois.
yeah, he not hypnotizes, but hits him with like kryptonite laced Joker gas, and he sees Lois as Doomsday. Lois is pregnant. He flies Doomsday into space. He comes to and realizes he just killed Lois and his unborn child. And Lois's heartbeat was tied to a bomb in Metropolis, and Metropolis blows up with her. He becomes evil and kills Joker.
That does feel like something Zack Snyder would have wanted to do eventually, because he just loves doing dark shit like that.
Yeah. I'm glad that recontextualized some of the decisions in this. I like the characters, what we know of them, as I know the character writing is not the strongest standpoint of this movie. I don't care for Lois, though. I don't think I've ever cared for any version of Lois ever in general in life. I love the theme of him revealing himself to the world. I didn't realize how much they hammered that in. Like, can you imagine what would happen if the man like that, like, were to just reveal himself and just fly around doing stuff? They say that exact line word for word a lot in this movie.
Like 4 times.
Doing stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, word for word, Evan.
Can you imagine someone with laser vision just
Imagine he
going
was
around
out here
doing stuff? He's a man.
buying a cup of coffee with his cape,
Yeah,
How people would freak out.
exactly. He hid for years, but would still out himself to save lives. I love the duality of one of his fathers saying to hide himself while the other was saying not to. Even though Pa Kent is completely in the wrong, and we will get to that.
100% agree.
Soups
Oh
ends
yeah,
up
for sure.
listening to the man that raised him his whole life over his biological father, who is pretty much a complete stranger, and I think that also makes sense. Also, why didn't Jor-El program his mother into the ship too? He said Lana would have loved to be here. Okay, then why didn't you program
Yeah.
her?
It's because she married Kingpin. That's why.
Okay. I love the score. I mean, we already talked about that a little bit. It goes insanely hard. I'm taken back every time. I'm taken back to when I first started listening to this score. It had been a few years since the movie had been out, but for some reason I looked up the trailer, and it was specifically trailer 2. And every time, it was sophomore year of college, and every time I hear those few piano keys of his theme, I'm taking right back to my dorm room sophomore year of college. I love this score so damn much. Only knock I have against it is the action is a little less memorable. As much as there is, it's a little less memorable than I remember, if that makes sense. I mean, as soon as I finished watching, I could only remember certain moments from it, which is fine. That's just like a nitpick. Also, funny side note, and this is my last note for my initials. I have a lot of tabs open in the same window. I have y'all's notes open, so I just see man as as your
Well, because he's a man, of course.
as your titles. So my topic is power fantasy. Right, this is initially what drew me to the character, or this version of him. As I've grown, I've actually grown to love the first half of the movie before he gets his suit, just as well as the second half. There was something really dope about him going around in various disguises, just trying to make a living and saving the people he could before he gets the confidence to put the suit on. Another side note, I even have a concept for a series like this where aliens come disguised as humans, and one of the main characters goes around doing spectacular things no one knows he can do because he's alien. There's more to it, but I'll leave it at that. Also, Man of Steel isn't the only story to do this, as far as the hero in disguise type of thing, as it doesn't have to be an alien every time, but I'm also drawn to the you're effing with the wrong one types of stories. I don't know what those are called, but Jack Reacher is an example of that from what I've seen of that show.
I was just thinking of that, yeah.
A lot of wandering around small towns and things like that. Like, that whole mysterious stranger thing is always fun.
A lot of westerns, I think, kind of play into that trope. Like,
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood in anything is basically that guy.
Yeah.
It kind of defines the Western, to be honest. In like
It's
a
at
great
least
way.
a big chunk of westerns. I don't think it's all of them, but it might be more than half.
So what you're saying is Superman is a Western.
Well, I think he'd be a cowboy.
The first
I
half
can't-
is, like you were saying. The second half is not. But the first half is in a good way. Yeah, Western's also one of the most common to blend with other genres, I feel like. Like, there's a season of The Expanse, it's basically a Western, which is really cool.
I don't know if you can say the whole first half. I think it's basically Act 2A is the part that you could categorize as a Western. Because I don't think the flashbacks count, and the whole 20-minute opening on Krypton is not
That really was 20 minutes, bro.
I forgot how long it was. I think I paused
It was pretty
when it
long.
was done. I was like, geez, this is so much. And it looks
I was
nice.
timing a
I
lot
don't
of that, like, to kind
mind
of see,
it.
and yeah, it's so long. We spend a long time there, and I'll have more to say about that later, but wow, there's so much. And funny enough, actually, I thought that the end fight was a lot longer than it actually is. It's really
same.
only like 20-ish minutes long, 25 minutes at the most. Like, they don't really start fighting until like half an hour before the end, like the whole big battle part. I thought it was like an hour. That's what I kept hearing over and over from people, and it's not even close to that long.
No, not even half of that. Sometimes I like whenever I stumble across like a bully or some public nuisance getting their just desserts when they pick on the wrong person. So that happens in real life too. Why are you smiling, Evan?
Am I?
Yeah, I thought you were about like holding back laughter. I was like,
No,
what the hell is
no. I don't know why I look like that, but no.
From a character creating perspective, I've always liked the power set of Superman as well. That's also what draws me to him. Who doesn't want to fly? Who doesn't want to be super strong, super fast, have heat vision? He has other powers, but I'll stop there because most copycat versions of him stop there too. Because I'm in love with the power set as well, I also tend to like other versions of him, as we have discussed. Evil or Not, Sentry, go watch Thunderbolts. Omni-Man, Blue Marvel, Homelander, Metro Man, even the damn Powerpuff Girls. All same moveset. I like it. Don't stop doing it. The character beyond the powers, well, I'll admit to not knowing much other than good guy, even with the animated movies under my belt. Like, I'm hoping the movie this year will enlighten me further, but I never found him boring, as a lot of people claim. Captain America is a good guy too, but do people find him not boring because he's not near invincible? Like, I don't think that's the only reason. Also, as strong as he is, he's not unbeatable. He's actually been beaten and died a few times. I mean, there's a movie called Death of Superman. So, his villains are also tailored to challenge him, so it's a shame this media hasn't made that popular enough. Because people find him boring, because he's just like, he can't be beaten, dude. Like, who wants to watch that? And it's like, no, he loses a lot. Y'all need to do your research.
I think they limit his villains a lot. Like, you're not doing like Metallo in this, and Metallo's whole thing is he's got a kryptonite heart, which is Superman's weakness. So it's easy if he can trick Superman to getting close, he can beat him pretty easily. So you're right. There's a lot of tailored villains, but we get a lot of the same villains in these movies. We get a lot of Lex Luthor. We get a lot of Zod, Doomsday in certain cases, especially in the animated movies too. We don't see as many of the ones that are like specific to like the rest of his rogues gallery. One big good example I think is Mr. Mxyzptlk, who's like an interdimensional character that the only way to send him home is to say his name backwards, right? And the reason that Superman can't beat him is because he's like an interdimensional being that can't just be physically hurt by conventional means, so he has to get him to say his name backwards, which means tricking him the same way every time. So it's Superman having to use something other than his powers to solve a problem. And there's plenty of villains like that. They just don't use them in mainstream movies like this because it's a little harder to make that like big and bombastic. Yeah, Parasite. Parasite's a good example because Parasite will literally take away his powers, right? Also, he's weak to magic. We never see him fight anyone magic in any of these movies, and that's a huge issue because you have other weaknesses for him besides kryptonite, and you don't necessarily use them. One thing that I really like that they do in a lot of Superman media, his dad usually dies a different way. I don't know how common this actually is. They do it on Smallville, and I think at one point it was in the comics. His dad dies of a heart attack, not from something where he absolutely could have saved him with his powers, making the point that Superman can't solve every problem by flying really fast or punching it, and that was a huge lesson for him in that he can't save everybody, and that's a big thing. Smallville's a little bit different. I don't want to spoil why. There's some like other like sci-fi type stuff that does go into it, but the end result is kind of the same, and it does in a lot of ways show him there's nothing that he can necessarily do every single time. And in a lot of media, he gets that lesson very young. They don't do a lot of that in these movies. So it feels like he might not have a lot of stories, but it's just like that they're not necessarily pushing forward with the stories in like the first couple films. And so he doesn't get more than a couple films a lot of the time, except for like the ones in the 70s and 80s, you know?
Brainiac's another good villain because Brainiac, one, is just leagues smarter than him, as I think Brainiac's an AI, like an organic AI or something weird.
Yeah, he is. They change it in some cases too. I think Superman the animated series started it where he's like a Kryptonian AI that like runs the planet. I think that was the first time they actually did that. I think in a lot of other cases he's just an AI from like somewhere else. But he's also a good villain.
He's smarter than him and has the knowledge of Kryptonian weaknesses. So Superman almost... Actually, I think every time I've seen Superman against Brainiac, he has needed some version of help, some sort of help from somebody.
Oh yeah, it's usually him in the Justice League.
Superman cannot beat Brainiac alone, and I think he's gotten more traction in recent years, but that's another villain tailored to him. That's like they won't show that in like the more popular versions.
Yeah, they do it in Injustice too. He's like the big villain of that, which is really cool. Because then they also bring in Supergirl, who's another great character. I'm excited for them to do more with her moving forward because she's one of the first movies they're doing for these new DC movies, and I think that's really cool. I think she's a great, very unexplored character in a lot of cases.
I don't know if Lobo is a villain tailored to him, but he is one of Like he's one of those villains that like hops between superhero as like kind of like Deathstroke. He doesn't have a single person that's like his hero adversary, but Lobo's another good one because Lobo's like legit unkillable because both heaven and hell banned him. Like he's not allowed to enter any sort of afterlife.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's really cool.
Also, his regeneration powers are absurd. They're like Wolverine level. All I have to say, he's not invincible, so stop it. I would have liked to see a bit more danger for this film specifically for him. I think the only times we see him bleed is when he's shot by the drone in the fortress, which never comes back for whatever reason. I don't know if he was bleeding or if it just burned his shirt, but that was the other scene where he coughs up blood on the ship. Maybe to make the world engine scene a bit better, because that scene goes on for like longer than it needs to with the tentacles chasing him. I forgot. I was not paying enough attention.
I forgot about the tentacles too, honestly.
Yeah.
Like until I was watching,
the
I'm like,
Hero
wait, when did
6
this
nanobot
happen?
fight.
So make it not only so there's a ticking clock, but make it so those tentacles chasing him can like damage him because they're Kryptonian. I don't know. Make something up. So that would have made it a little bit more tense in that moment. I do like the scene that follows where he flies up against the gravity. That's just so cool, man. Also, I want a Superman video game. I don't know how it would be made concept-wise. People have been debating this for years, but video games are a larger industry than films. I don't think that's widely known, but yeah, they are. At least 1 billion more. Like, the industry is way larger than film. I want a video game centered around him so that can shift some more public opinion of him for people that might not want to go watch these movies. We have Injustice. That's as close as we got, other than Superman 64, the game nobody talks about. But that does not help with this characterization, because people who play video games, they see Superman in a fighting video game and he's evil, and they're just like, oh. My last note of this topic, I was going to get into Metropolis, but I want to break for you guys. You guys got anything you want to throw in for this topic before I talk about the city and its destruction?
Yeah, I don't have a ton with this. I did when you brought this topic and I rewatched it with that in mind. I do think that like the power fantasy is a lot of how Zack Snyder approached this character in like the way that he's framed and like filmed and presented. Even the way that they don't give him much characterization, I think kind of lets him be a little bit of that like audience insert kind of character. Personally, I've never been huge on power fantasy stories. I think it's always more empowering to see a story of somebody who struggles to become good at something. It feels kind of like playing a video game on invincibility mode to have a character just be like really good at everything from the word go. Even in superhero stories, like I think it's better to see that trial and error. That kind of ties into the first flight scene. I think it's the best scene in the movie, hands down. I think most people probably would agree with that. But I do think it would be better if it had a little bit more like character weight. I said the same thing about Defying Gravity with Wicked this past year. It can be a really cool moment when a character flies or like can do something for the first time, like gets control of their abilities. But I think it's always stronger when we've seen them struggle with it and we kind of understand what it means for them when they're able to master that ability. Kiki's Delivery Service has a really good version of that scene. I think The Leap of Faith in Spider-Verse is another good one. But I think the first flight scene could have been more powerful if there was a bit more... Like, it is a character moment, but it could have meant more. I don't want to call it a weakness of this exactly, but it's a missed opportunity. That's most of my notes. Like, I'm not against the existence of power fantasy stories. They just don't tend to work for me. I think it makes sense that somebody would approach this character like it, because the whole point of Superman is that he has the best abilities, and I mean, you were just saying he's not invincible, but he is more invincible than I think even most other superheroes. So it sort of makes sense that at some point that approach would be taken.
I kind of agree with that. I'm not as big into power fantasy stories either. Like they can be fun, but I think what I like about this is I don't necessarily see it entirely as like a power fantasy story. Like I think the power fantasy elements of it are very concentrated, and I think it makes the rest of the movie like a lot more accessible. Like I think when you were talking about power fantasy, I my immediate thoughts were okay, you got the flight scene. You've got a lot of the fights with Zod and with other Kryptonians, which are, like I said, very concentrated in the movie. They're in very specific parts. So it's not like the entire movie is that all the time, or if there's like a switch and then all of a sudden it's just all of that all the time. And like we talked about before, the finale is not an hour long. It's like a 20-minute ish fight with Zod mixed in with other things. There's even a lot of talking in that, like between the two of them, like, but you still get that big end fight, right? So like there's power fantasy elements, but there's not necessarily like it doesn't take over the movie, which I think is what kind of makes it work here because it's not the entire sole focus. And I also think too, like I agree with what you were saying too, Evan. I think the story of struggling to get good at something is normally a more emotionally accessible story. And I think that like the flight scene, like you were talking about, I think that what they were initially going for was they were kind of hinting at that when he falls and he crashes into that mountain. But then I didn't realize until I watched the scene that happens, and then he doesn't like get up and try to fly again. Like we're not seeing him struggle. We're seeing like he literally crashes, then he looks up at the sky and, I think maybe he might go up again, but then it just works. Like, there's not like a constant struggle after that. It's not like, he's honing his skills. Like, Supergirl, the TV show, is sort of a good example where they do a little bit of that, where like she's like known how to fly when the show starts, but she hasn't been a superhero this entire time. So, like, she doesn't practice flying at high speeds all the time. So, there's a part where, they're trying to make her costume and she crashes during one of the earlier scenes because they realize the reason Superman has a cape is for aerodynamics. So learning not only how to hone your powers, but how to design your equipment that you use and stuff like that's also part of like building up that skill set. And we never see him like learn to be Superman,
Yeah.
right? He just kind of decides to do it, which is a lot of the nature of like what this story is. A lot of it is he keeps being told to hold off on doing this thing, but then once he decides to do the thing, he can just kind of do it. Again, I think that's kind of what they were going for. They're not trying to make it so that like, well, he has to learn, like he has to decide to do it in the first place and then struggle and learn how to do it right. And I think in some ways BVS touches on that topic a little bit in like a different way, but by that point he's established, so it's a little bit different. I think part of what works in certain Superman stories for me, and I've watched like a whole bunch of them, so you see this a lot, where a lot more of his struggle is not about learning how to use his powers, it's about learning how to limit them. So you get that power fantasy element, but in a lot of ways, like he's very afraid of hurting people. That's a really big thing with Superman stories, is that
Superman versus the Elite. I don't
yeah,
know if you've
yeah,
seen
that's a
that
big thing there too. They do
animated
it
one.
with yeah, they do it with that. I think they do it with there's a scene in Justice League that's like really famous. I think that he's fighting either Darkseid or Doomsday, but he's fighting a big guy and he can essentially like go all out, and he even
Yeah.
comments on it. He's like, I'm
Hmm.
constantly holding myself back. Now I don't have to. And he goes crazy on this guy. And he destroys him, essentially. Like he wins the fight somewhat easily.
I remember him saying the world is like made of cardboard. That was in Superman versus the Elite, but that movie is about the power fantasy and him holding back and what him not holding back would look like, and it gets insane.
I think they do it in both. I don't know if I've seen Superman versus the Elite, at least not in a while, but I've heard about that too. I think they do the same scene in both of
It's a
them,
great movie.
essentially.
It's actually up there for one of the best for Superman for
It's
me.
one of those gaps in my Superman filmography that I think I really need to fill, along with like the original Superman movies, like the Christopher Reeve ones. Like I've only seen the first one, and I want to watch like all of them because from what I've heard, like they're really charming and really fun.
I heard they get worse after two.
Yeah, I have all of them on the Fandango at home, and I have the Donner cut too, which is the original like what they were originally going to do with it. with Richard Donner before they fired him, like in the middle of production. Like they've cut together a piece of that, so I want to like get through all those.
You guys were saying, like, what if he was, like, holding back or something? Maybe there was something more direct, but I've been rethinking, like, ways you could build up to that first flight scene. If it's not going to be hard for him, then make it emotional in some other way.
He does the laugh.
He does.
He laughs.
He does.
He does
It's like
do
the
the
only
laugh.
time he smiles in this movie.
He smiles at Lois. He smiles at Lois one time.
At the end.
No, in the cornfields.
Okay, so he smiles 3 times. Because he smiles at her at the end as Clark Kent. Too.
Yeah, he does. He does. He smiles more later on, mostly in scenes with Lois.
That makes sense.
Like in other movies.
We'll get into this more, but Pa Kent is always telling him, don't use your powers. Like, oh, one of you said, like, if he hurt someone. So I was thinking, like, what if there was a moment? What if we had a flashback with him flying as a kid and he's, like, reckless and he, I don't know, destroys a building because he does that enough times in this movie.
He doesn't,
like-
and we'll get into that.
Well, but say he did as a kid. Like, say he's just zipping around, like, at night and he knocks over a water tower or something. Like, causes some
The
kind of
WB
destruction.
water tower.
Maybe. If we wanted to be super...
And the
like,
Animaniacs
meta.
are inside.
Yeah.
If he kills the Animaniacs, he can't forgive himself.
Guys, are we gonna write a movie? Are we gonna write a Superman movie? Let's do it.
This is Space Jam 3. This is the opening scene. But, okay, say that happens. I think that's a believable moment. And then his dad, like, very in character for, like, Pa Kent in this, reprimands him and is like, what did I say? Don't do this. And he can back it up with, like, you don't know what you're doing. You're 10. Stop doing this. Like, you're gonna get people hurt. And he internalizes that. And then he doesn't do it again forever. Like, it scares him into, like, holding it back until he's 30 or whatever he is in this movie. And his new father figure comes in and says, yes, it can be dangerous. Like, you will have to learn to control it. But you can't learn to control it until you start actually trying to use it. And then it's like, hell yes. This scene where he's, like, finally letting loose. And that smile, you could keep the scene exactly the same, and it would still hit that much harder. If it connected to, like, something else, if it showed some kind of character growth or, like, reflected... I don't know. If it was rooted in character at all. Maybe they didn't want to go that direction for some reason. Maybe somebody did suggest that. I don't know. But I think there's a lot of ways you could make that scene stronger through context without changing a single frame.
I think if you were to go that route, 1, I do like that. 2, we would need a scene of him, let's say some guy's getting beat up, jumped by 2 guys in an alley, and he's watching and then walks away. Or there's like a police chase that goes by and he bites a hot dog and just
And then
watches
Raindrops Keep Falling in My Head song starts playing.
And then it freeze
He's
frames.
like, nothing's worrying me.
Even better, so he's walking, he bites the hot dog, and then he puts on a pair of sunglasses.
Ooh.
And then it freeze
Yeah.
frames.
Yeah.
As if he was behind it somehow.
I feel like I've seen this before somewhere though.
I can't put my finger on it, but it does feel strangely familiar.
If you punch me, I bleed.
Yeah. And he does get punched, and he does bleed a little bit. Somebody really should write this down.
There's our quota
Yeah. Yeah.
for every episode.
I was wondering how we were gonna get. I was like, it's gonna happen, but I don't know.
It's gonna happen.
where it's gonna happen.
The way that the power fantasy works for Superman, I feel like it's best when he's kind of having to hold himself back. I feel like the parts of this movie specifically that sort of distance me from it are when you get, like, you'll have some scenes of him, like, being really worried, but like you said, Evan, we're not seeing a lot of the setup for that. And I think some of that might also be that we don't really see him discover his powers either. Like, we're doing the origin thing. We even have a very origin-like scene where he's doing that whole first flight thing, right? Like, it's kind of clear, based on other things, like him hitchhiking and things like that he's never actually flown before, right? So that's kind of cool. But then we never see him as a kid, like, discovering that he's stronger than everybody else. We never see him discovering his invulnerability or his heat vision or any of that stuff. Like, when we meet
No,
him,
we have the heat vision
Yeah, the heat vision.
and X-ray
That's
vision.
the
in
only
same
one
scene.
we have.
well, no, because we don't see him discover those. The first time we see him use heat vision, I think, is when we're seeing
He blasts the doorknob.
You know what though? It kind of seemed like he knew he could do that. Like it seemed like
He didn't
did it
seem
on
bothered
purpose.
that some red stuff came
Yeah,
out
he
of his
seemed.
eyes.
So that's my thing. Is like it seemed like he knew, or and you know what? He was in a bad state as a kid, so maybe he wasn't thinking about the fact that he did it. But again, like we never see that moment of like, oh shit, what did I just do? Type thing. We get that in other Superman stories.
I think he just sees, from his perspective, he just sees a tint of red. Like he doesn't. I don't know how it works in these movies. Every version is different. I don't know if he feels that coming out of his eyes. Zod clearly does.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing where I think the Kryptonians kind of learn about other things with their powers a little bit too quickly. But that's the way they always kind of do it with Zod and his people. Like I could understand
I'm
knowing,
fine
like, oh,
with that though.
I have
Me
super
too.
strength. I have this. Like we can skip some of those parts fine, but I think like it would be like we do get a little bit of that with Zod and the Heat Vision. He gets used to it really quick.
No, I'm fine with that though because of the character. Like, I didn't make the connection before that because they mention on Krypton that all the babies are made for certain jobs, and he
It's basically
says later
Gattaca.
on in he says later on in the
Yeah.
movie he was made to preserve Kryptonian. Everything is for his people. I never made that connection like that was his purpose. Even though he clearly
Yeah.
states it, I didn't make the connection that, oh, as a baby, he was bred for that.
For this stuff. So that adaptability is probably part of that.
Yeah, he said
I
he's
guess.
spent every waking moment honing his senses. So I was like, nope, that makes perfect sense. Like, I don't mind him learning to hone this in a few seconds. That makes sense as to why some dude who's been
Yeah, because I mean, he
fighting
would
his
have
whole
trained for
life-
that his whole life too.
Yeah.
Because I always feel like that
He
kind of
didn't
thing is
train on a
always more
farm.
training. He didn't train on the farm.
I'm sorry,
That's one of my favorite lines, honestly. I forgot
Yeah.
how good that line reading is.
Where did you train? On a farm.
Farm. Michael Shannon is so good. I want to just
yeah.
highlight. He's like
good.
the
He's
best
still
Zod.
kind of
He's
goofy
just
in
great.
that opening scene. I will find him.
I
He says
will
it four
find
times.
him.
I will find him. I was like,
It
okay,
wouldn't
we
be
get
as
it.
goofy if he didn't say it so many times.
He says
'Cause
it
even
4
before he yells it.
He
He
said-
says
yeah.
it 4 times.
I was like, we get it. Okay, like you're not like you could give him a monologue. I will not
He's
rest
got that
until...
intensity that you need. Like he's got that Zod intensity that you need to
Yeah.
understand that he is like a hardcore he's a scary guy. He would be scary even without superpowers.
But he's
you know.
less scary because he says the same thing 4 times.
I will find him. I will find him.
Whilst in handcuffs, and then he is frozen and launched into space.
Zack Snyder was like, "We're gonna use one of these takes, dude. Like, just do it. Just give us a few readings, and
use all
we'll
of
pick
them.
one." You just use it
Did you
all.
notice the things they shot off into were very phallic?
I have
Oh,
seen
yes.
that pointed out.
That was the first thing I noticed this time because I'm like, wow, that is just because I noticed it with his little Superboy ship. I noticed it with the little pod that he came to Earth in, and then I noticed it again because right after that, then we're seeing Zod get launched into space.
Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people had to work on that. Did no one ever say something like, maybe let's just make it look a little?
They needed
different?
that clip of the black man saying, "That's a penis."
I don't think I've seen that.
You
It's
gotta.
from How I
it's-
Met Your Mother.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We don't see him discovering his powers, so I think that certain scenes like that, they're a little harder to make work when we don't have that build up, right? Because like this is one of those few movies that I think the second half in some ways works a lot better than the first. Because in the first half, there are certain specific scenes where we get really close to Clark, and then there's other scenes where there's a lot of distance from him because of the way that
Well,
they're
yeah,
presented.
we're following Lois mainly.
We follow Lois. We follow Jor-El first. Jor-El's the main character in that first 20 minutes, and you get a lot more. I feel like you build up a lot more of his emotional relationship with Zod than you get with pretty much any of the characters that Clark interacts with. Because again, we're getting those personal things with Jor-El immediately. and we're not getting those with Clark until way later after they were already kind of supposed to be established just from a structural standpoint. So that also makes like the scene where Ghost Jor-El is destroyed by Zod in the ship, that hits harder than a lot of these other Clark scenes with like his dad or with Lois, because we saw that buildup happen, and then we're seeing these people that we've already learned were clearly like friends to some extent, and we've clearly learned like that Zod in a lot of ways really didn't want to kill this guy, even if to him it was just an AI form, because it wasn't really an AI form to him, it was Jor-El. He had to kill Jor-El again, and he tries to distance himself from him, but he can't. All of that emotion hits really hard because we had that buildup. In the first half, we're seeing a lot of things through Lois's perspective, or we're seeing a lot of like interspersed flashbacks in between only semi-connected scenes of Clark wandering around. And like conceptually, all that stuff is really good, but as a cohesive whole, they don't necessarily fit together, right? In the same way that like the second half is a lot more linear in its storytelling, and I think that helps it with the build-up, because as soon as we get the flight scene and we get like Zod showing up and things like that, like once Zod shows up like in that second half, I feel like that's the midpoint, or I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I think once we get to that part, then the movie follows a very like straightforward and cohesive narrative. And I think that in a lot of ways works better. And if we'd had all of that emotional buildup at the beginning, then these other things might have worked a little bit better, including the whole idea of like we would have gotten the impression that Clark has spent his whole life, you know, walking on eggshells around people from the perspective of I could kill someone with these abilities, right? But every time we saw him using them when he was younger, it was just him saving people. Like, he prevented deaths as opposed to potentially hurting somebody else. The most we get a hint of that is in that bully scene, which I feel like is misplaced in some ways.
I want to get into that scene.
No, for sure. Because I know that's a big part of your topic, is that scene. That's the most we get a hint at. We never actually see him hurt anybody, or even see him hurt the environment around him out of anger, showing us that he could potentially hurt somebody. Like, yes, we know it as a concept.
That's also part of what makes superheroes fun in general, is watching them learn their abilities. So you don't have to make it to where he struggles. And like, that's not a necessity. You don't have to make it to where he struggles. Some people are just prodigies, and Superman is one of them, meant to be.
Sure.
But him discovering them when he was younger would have been a nice add-on, because that's cool to learn. You see that in a lot of superhero media, like Spider-Man, little stupid things on his fingers, climbing the wall or jumping across the rooftops. I'm only thinking of Spider-Man right now.
Well, Spider-Man's a good example.
Well, how about Jack and the Incredibles? Because he has like 20 abilities, and he's just like a 1-year-old that has no impulse control, and he just goes off with it. Like, even that, we could have had a scene like that with... I think it would have been out of place, and we should have done more of the Spider-Man type thing, but that's a route you can take, and that was an example that they had available at the time this was made.
I didn't actually watch the full movie, but again, I've seen reviews and kill counts and stuff on it. It happened in Brightburn, too. Specifically, I'm specifically thinking of the scene when there's a lawnmower flipped over. I forget how it gets flipped over, but the blades are spinning, and curious little Brandon reaches his hand into it, and the blades break on his hand. Like, that's cool. I don't know why he was drawn to hurting himself with the blades there. But, yeah, little stuff like that would have been cool to see. Like, I agree.
I wonder if it's maybe because we've had 2 major Superman movies before this that they felt like they wanted to skip over it. Have you guys have seen at least a couple of those? Like, do they have those scenes in those other movies where we see the like discovery?
Yeah. So Superman the movie, they do, for sure. There's a really cool scene, like we see how fast he is.
Okay, so maybe that's why they felt like they wanted to skip it.
Yeah, like they see how fast he is in those, and I think that's a big thing too. Is I feel like there's a lot of feeling that we kind of know what Superman's power set is, but I think the reason that doesn't necessarily work is because we still need to connect with this version of the character, and seeing that struggle, I think, helps us connect with him and understand it in this specific scenario, in this specific version of the character, because they are doing different things with this version too. It's not like your very standard Superman. Even the cartoon, I want to get into this a little bit in my topic with like world building stuff, but I think that a big chunk of what they do in like the first three Superman the Animated Series episodes are an origin story. And in total, that's only about an hour long. But they do so much. Like the whole first episode is a Krypton episode, showing Jor-El and showing all that origin stuff. And it does a lot more than this prologue does, even though it's about the same length. Like you get a lot more impressions of like the relationships between characters, the dynamic on Krypton itself. Not as much with its other citizens, but you still get the impression of like the government's relationship to the main character and like why that society specifically might have collapsed as opposed to like being told, right? And then the second episode is a younger version of Clark discovering his powers in Smallville, essentially, and like learning how to use them before he becomes Superman. There's different versions of this, but there's some more efficient ways to do it, and I get why they wanted to skip it, but I don't think it necessarily works that they did.
I wonder if we'll see a kid version of him in the new one. I would
I don't know.
assume so, because his parents seem like a big part of the movie, too.
I think it's also somewhat likely that we won't, not to like totally contradict you, but we are living in a post Spider-Verse, post Tom Holland Spider-Man, post the Batman world, where with these characters that have had 4 or 5 iterations in the past 50 years, like it's kind of assumed that we know at this point, and I think Superman may have reached that point.
For the, as Angel said, I think it was the last episode, they never even put the title of the movie in the trailer. They just put the symbol.
Yeah.
True.
It's pretty,
which I love.
Pretty well known.
I kind of think that's great.
They know what they got.
Yeah.
They know
the first teaser they didn't. There wasn't even that. There wasn't even the crest or anything like that. None of that because they don't need it.
They just need a theme. That was it.
Which is so good.
Oh, every version.
We'll get into that too because we're going to talk about what we think about the new movie.
I wanted to talk about Metropolis. It's destroyed by the end. But it's less Superman's fault than I would remember, and then YouTube would have you think. I think he does a total of like 2 to 3 things where I'm thinking like, maybe you could have prevented that, or maybe just don't do that.
Like when he flies up to dodge
over
the truck?
oil, when he flies over the oil truck and it explodes behind him. It looked cool, yeah, but
it was it looked really cool. It was the funniest thing ever because I'm like, this is not something that it feels like this Superman would do, but he did it because it looked cool. Yeah. I like that.
When he scrapes Zod's face against the side of the building, I'm like, I don't know if there are people in that, but maybe don't do that, because that'll mess with the structural integrity of that building, Superman. But the rest, it's not his fault. As YouTube and all these people online would have you believe. Realistically, though, when did he have time to save anyone while Zod was on top of him?
He did not.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. Also,
I don't have as much of a problem with the destruction as like many people seem to. I understand the criticisms and like the moment where he dodges the gas truck, like, yeah, that's bad. But like it is, like you're saying, it's one of maybe 2 or 3.
It's like Ant-Man. I thought it was a water truck.
Whoops.
Yeah, and it's nothing new in fiction, especially dealing with superheroes, where the villain has the advantage over the hero because the hero is trying to save lives. I actually wrote this in my notes, so Raimi was going to come up one way or another. It happened in the very first Spider-Man movie at the end when Tobey saved the kids and MJ while the New Yorkers distracted Gabi. Maybe he could have saved those people while also fighting Zod. I think that's kind of the point of his character, where, to quote Spider-Verse, he can do both. But most of the city's destruction, I don't believe, is his fault. People forget half of the destruction came from the world engine that he was actively trying to stop for like half of that climax. Like, that's why Lawrence Fishburne and Lombard, they all got trapped in the building. That wasn't because Superman was fighting Zod, that was because Zod was trying to terraform the Earth. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Superman stopped that part.
Yeah, Superman stopped it. He may have... Yeah, Superman may have not saved them directly, but it wasn't his fault. It's crazy. Anyone who wants to point to Batman v Superman, because that's a pretty major plot point of that movie, seeing it from Batman's perspective, where we see the shot of Superman and Zod falling to Earth with the rest of the like satellite debris. Zod kicked Superman through the satellite. We see that in this movie. So at what point was that Superman's fault? Oh, okay.
I actually want to defend that plot point a little bit, because I wrote that in my notes too.
Mm-hmm.
As far as we go, you're absolutely right. I think that it's weird that people have that perspective about Clark, because we see all the steps that they're taking to stop this. So we see Clark going in and stopping the World Engine and then fighting Zod, and how most of the destruction, like you said, there's a couple things, but a lot of it really is not Clark's fault. He didn't have any real control over that situation.
He's not crashing Zod through buildings. The
for
only
the
other
most part,
time
he's really not.
was Smallville, where he throws the dude into the trains, but that also knocks the dude out of the fight, because then he's dealing with Faora and able to save the Colonel and all that after.
That's very, very true.
He's not the one tackling Zod through buildings, and that, like, I hadn't seen this movie in years, so like I had originally thought, and my viewpoint had been skewed, like, oh yeah, that's pretty bad, like their fight destroyed the city. No, that was Zod doing all of that to Superman. So
Zod blew up that building with his heat vision.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing, too. And again, that's something that we're seeing. So, like, as the audience, we know that this is not Clark's fault for the most part. I do think that the reason that the plot point works in Batman v Superman is because if you think about it from the citizen's perspective, Superman himself has not debuted yet as a hero. A lot of these movies will have him debut as a hero in some form of Metropolis before someone like Zod shows up and he has like a big destructive battle, obviously, before he's exposed as being an alien, before, he has a lot of these things where it's like he might accidentally hurt someone. He usually comes off as a hero first. But for most of Metropolis and for most of the world, this is the first time they are seeing Superman. Whether they've been saved by him in secret or not, this is the first time they're seeing him. So as far as this debut goes, this is absolutely the way that everybody would think of it, because they are just watching these two aliens in capes crashing through buildings and destroying the city. They don't know who the aggressor is, because it really doesn't matter. It almost looks like they're fighting a whole separate thing, a whole separate deal, and destroying the city as a result. Which means that the part of Batman v Superman that doesn't make any sense is that there is literally anybody who thinks that this version of Superman is a hero in any capacity. Regardless of what he did after that, a lot of what is important in stuff like this is that first impression. So if that was the first impression that most people got of him, this would be like very hard for him to get out from under in the first place. So like the Batman perspective on this would be the first thing that most people would have. If anything, that movie, it would have shown more of a struggle if he was trying to get the public back on his side, or even Lois was, as like a way that she could be like almost like his PR person in a lot of ways, because she knows how to like use media to influence people's opinions if she has to, but we also don't see her doing that. So like I think it works in the sense that like this is absolutely the way that people would think of him, but only Batman seems to think of him that way, and he's the bad guy in the next one.
There's a moment in this, actually, it doesn't exactly speak to what you're talking about, but it plays into it. I don't remember the character's name, but Law and Order dude is, at the end of the Smallville fight, he sees Superman, and he's like, this guy is not our enemy. I'm like, bro, how would you know that? You spent the whole time, like, the whole time Superman was fighting the other guy, this dude was, like, busy being not killed by Katy Perry. And, okay, I called her Katy Perry because she looks like Katy Perry.
No,
but,
wait.
He didn't see anything. He didn't see anything that Superman was doing. How would he know what side he was on? Like, there's no evidence.
He tackles her to the ground right before she stabs him.
Yeah. He got saved by Superman.
Yeah, he quite literally.
They all did.
Evan didn't watch the movie.
I think it's a little bit flimsy. But yeah, whatever. I agree with the rest of what you guys are saying.
Also, my dad loves to point out whenever I talk to him about this movie, this is exactly what would happen if two gods descended to Earth and started scrapping.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
They wanted to go for a realistic, gritty. This is bar for bar exactly what would happen. It would be more than... It actually, in real life, it would be so much worse. And I agree with my dad. Like, they'd be going through city. They would probably go all around the world, but I don't know if they had the budget for that. Also, I want to reference the end of season 1 of Invincible, so spoilers for that. Invincible does not save whatever nameless city that he's fighting his father in. So do people blame him for that destruction? No. The only difference was he's making an effort to save a couple of people that still died in the end. So
I think it is. There's a little bit of a different perspective that you're coming in with there, because so this is more from what I've heard than anything that I have really observed myself about this character, because this is the only version of it, Superman, that I know. But I think people's problem largely stems from like what they think Superman is supposed to be. And I don't mean to put that in quotes by like by doing that, I don't mean to diminish it. But a lot of people say like, well, Superman is supposed to be about saving people. Like he is supposed to be like this purely good person. And Invincible is a subversion of that with Omni-Man. Like Omni-Man is their Superman character and he's evil. Same with like Homelander. It's more acceptable to audiences to have this kind of like massive apocalyptic destruction in a story like that, where it is meant to be a bit more adult and you do see a lot of blood and people die all the time in that. Whereas Superman is, from what I've gathered, historically meant to be a bit more of a wholesome character. And this also existed before The Boys. And, well, maybe not before the comic did, but before the TV show for The Boys or Invincible. Like, that's a bit more...
Invincible was... Oh, you mean...
I'm saying the show. Like, I think the comic was before.
No, the comic was 03.
Okay, but I think in terms of, like, people who mostly watch their superhero media, like, I didn't know about Homelander or Invincible when this came out, and I didn't have any other perception of Superman. At best, you can say Hancock had come out a few years before, and that's another, like,
that's another
subversion of Superman.
Enjoyable film.
I like it.
But that's kind of a case where, like, it's not literally the character, it's a Superman-inspired character, so you can kind of play around with that without worrying about having the weight of what audiences expect from this character. And I think in this case, like, people are more nitpicky because they're like, this isn't what Superman's supposed to be. That's what I've gathered.
They have this idealized version in their head.
Yeah, I feel like I'm doing a little too much of, like, speaking for a very broad group of people that probably have a variety of opinions, but that's kind of what I've heard brought up with this movie in regards to the destruction scenes.
Angel, the lighting in your room makes it look like the sun's actually behind you.
Oh, does it? I can
Kind
move my
of,
head.
yeah. You're
it
kind of
actually-
backlit a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's cool. Don't fix it. I like it.
Oh, okay. No, wrong side.
Were you gonna say something, Angel?
I was going to agree with Evan. I think that it is a very general way to put it, but it is also a very common general opinion about the Superman is supposedly meant to be portrayed in this particular way. And I mean, it could be for me, like, I prefer the more human aspect. You guys haven't seen my Adventures with Superman, but the thing that I like most about that is that Superman is kind of a dork. Like, he is, he's big and strong and everything, but he is a very anxious human being. He has trouble talking to Lois Lane, who he has a crush on. He's got these little very, like, human nuances that show that Superman, for all intents and purposes, is human, because those are the best ways to portray aliens in media, I feel like, is to show that they also have emotions that are relatable. They also have anxieties and stuff like that. That's also, like, just they're portrayed as very humanized in a lot of these cases, which may or may not be, people's preferred way to portray aliens, considering they do come from a whole different planet and a whole different culture, with different needs to adapt to different environments and stuff like that. But I think in Superman's particular case, like, given that he looks very human and he was raised as a human and lived, like, among us in disguise, it works really, really well. He's not this idealized person. I think that that's another one of the weaknesses of this movie, is that by most of the people in his life, and even just, like, observing him from the outside, a lot of the way they portray him here is as that very idealized version. Like, Jonathan Kent brings up so many times, and we talked about this before, that, oh, one day you're gonna change the whole world, Clark. Everyone's gonna see that you're super Jesus, and you're gonna,
There's a lot of Jesus imagery in this. Like,
there's
a lot.
so
There's
much.
a
I almost
lot
thought
of
about talking
Jesus.
about it, but I'm like, but there's so much there, and I have no observations other than like, well, it's Jesus imagery. He's treated as a symbol even by the man who raised him. Like, I could understand that more so in the context of like Jor-El, but Jor-El's more emotional with him in some scenes than Jonathan Kent is. He's more emotional in certain scenes because, he obviously, it's an emotional thing. He had to watch his son go away and fly away while he died with his planet and send him off into, God knows where, really, at a place where he could potentially die. He thinks he's sending him off to a better life, but he's not going to watch him grow up. He's not going to do any of this stuff. And now this version of him is seeing him as an adult. And he even comments on it, like, it's crazy, like, how hard that's got to be, because he's got all of Jor-El's memories and emotions and everything. Jonathan Kent, in a lot of his scenes, is spending a lot of time telling Clark, like, the reason you can't do this is because one day you're going to do this in front of people, and the world needs
Right.
to be ready.
When,
but also, not Clark needs to be ready, the world needs to be ready. And I think we're supposed to assume that underneath all that, that's what he means. Because that's a huge thing with Jonathan Kent, especially on Smallville. He's very big on, like, he wants to protect his son. Because it's his son. It's the boy he raised. He loves him. He is afraid that if Clark exposes his powers, he's going to be shunned because everyone's going to think that even if they don't think he's an alien, they're going to see him as different, and their first instinct is going to be to stop him before he does something that could endanger people, even if he never gives the impression that's going to happen. So his entire motivation is always protecting Clark as a person, not saying, well, one day you're going to be a symbol, and, like, that's the thing. Like, you can't do this yet because clearly you're not ready because, you're 12. And, you did the horrible thing of saving a whole bus full of kids.
Yeah.
How could
Should've
you
let
do
him
this,
die.
Clark?
Pa Kent is so... I hate him so much in this. And, like, he's like, with great power comes great let him die because haters. Like, he has the worst motivational speeches. And I kind of hear what you're saying there, Angel, with, like, he wants to be protective. I think there's a better way to have that come across. Because I thought about that as, like, a way
exactly.
to do
like,
it.
The way that they do it every other time.
Which I haven't seen, at least in other Superman versions. But, like, I've had that, like, even with my own parents have, like, said something like that to me, where it's like, we don't want you to do this, not because it's a bad thing to do, but because we don't want you to get hurt. And I think that could have been an approach that, like, you could have had that come across more with Pa Kent. He doesn't seem to be taking that. He's like, no, nobody with these abilities should do that. Like, it's not being protective of his kid and him not wanting Clark to get hurt. He seems to think, like, no, if any parent was in my position, they should not do this because the haters are too powerful, Clark. They'll hate on you so much because I'm Taylor Swift and I care about that kind of thing. Like, that truly seems to be the bulk of his argument. They get into it a few times, like, right before his death scene. Like, his freaking death scene is so bad. Like, it's not a poorly, like,
Worst
shot scene or
film.
anything. But
Horrible scene.
Thematically, it is so confused. It's like, you could come save me. I will go. I will sacrifice myself to save our dog. But as soon as my foot gets stuck, nope, no, stay back because the haters are too powerful, Clark. Pa Kent, in his actions, is showing that he believes that, like, putting yourself in danger to save another being, seeing as it's a dog, or, like, other humans in that scene. He's showing that he believes that.
Also very funny that they had to go back because she locked the dog in the car by accident.
Yeah, like, but he absolutely just cannot let his son, who is in no danger, like, physically in that scene, he will die before he sees the haters come for him. Like, which I can understand being a bit protective, but he's just so pessimistic. And he, like you were saying, he's like, when the world is ready. Okay, when is that, dude? When is the world gonna be ready? Like, you are... And he says, like, the fact that the line, what was I supposed to do? Let him die? Maybe. The fact that that's in this movie is like, he's such a bad dad. I don't care how protective you are. Like, was he gonna be like... So on the alternate side, the other way that like, sequence goes down is Clark is on the bus, it falls into the river, And he's like, well, I will be the sole survivor of this, and the rest of my classmates will die. And then he comes home after, like, being debriefed by the police.
And then everyone's like, guys, I think Clark killed those kids.
That's probably what it would look like. And then his dad would be like, you did the right thing. You did the right thing. I know that was hard, but you did, like,
Good boy.
Yes, good job letting them die. The world,
boy
the haters, son, they're so powerful. Jelani, I'm sorry I've been overriding. You seem like you want to jump in.
No, you just started to sound like me when I was talking about the Green Knight. No, I didn't have anything to say. I just wanted to. I agree. Like, his teachings were so confused, and that makes sense as to why Clark is confused.
Yeah.
As an older guy, because he's just.
I let my father die because I trusted him.
Because haters.
Yeah, he said my
father.
father.
That's the whole thing.
Believed the world was so down in his belief that the world wouldn't be ready. He died for it. That's not admirable. That is stupid. It is incredibly stupid.
The scene looked cool. I thought it was cool when he disappeared in a tornado. Very visually awesome.
Yeah.
But the whole rest of the scene didn't work because it made no sense.
Right, they make him go out like a badass when he's just being stupid.
Clark could have gone and done the same thing at regular human speed. And he would have been able to get the thing off of his foot before anything else happened. Obviously, John didn't know it was going to go down that particular way, but there was no point in which there were no TV cameras, there were no citizens that were going to report this to the news. Nothing about this incident would have made it so that everybody thought that Clark was Superman. And if he had got stuck in a tornado, he just leaves Smallville, because he does that anyway.
If you replace Pa Kent with Clark in that scene, he could slightly... One, he probably wouldn't even get trapped. Two, he could slightly lift the car and blame it on the wind coming from the tornado.
Exactly. The wind lifted the car with my hand. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding. I actually agree.
Also,
No, I actually
regular
agree with you.
humans have done stuff like that in, like...
Yeah.
You hear those stories about, like, the mom...
Mothers
like,
lifting cars off their babies.
100-pound, like, 5'0" mom
Yeah.
lifts up a whole, like, truck because adrenaline, because her kid's trapped under it. Like, that can happen.
It does happen, yeah. And, like, Jonathan Kent didn't do any of that even. He didn't lift the car. He didn't have to lift the car, because all he had to do was open the door and then get the dog to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he did regular human feats and still saved the dog.
And then breaks his ankle, and he's like, well, this is it.
He breaks it out of
he
the
gets
view
out.
of every other person there, too. Nobody saw him break his ankle and walk away.
I forgot. I thought he dies. No, he gets out. He gets out of that trap thing, and then he's okay. And then I think the tornado takes the car away anyway. So, oh man, yeah, that wasn't. He's not.
He's probably the worst superhero father figure, aside from, like, literally abusive ones like Omni-Man. Like,
Yeah. The worst part is, like, he shouldn't be, because, like I said, in other versions of the character, he's one of the best. Like,
yeah, his parents are a big
Smallville
part
version
of his...
is one of my favorite superhero dads. Even though he's harsh and strict, he's doing it all to protect Clark. Not even because the world is full of haters, but because he's just afraid of what his son will have to go through if people discover that he's different. He's afraid that the entire world will try to destroy him. And yes, that's a hater thing also. But in this, the motivation seems a lot more about, like, the world will eventually be ready, but you're not ready yet. He almost blames Clark for all of these, like, failed attempts when he has to learn how to do something there's no precedent for on Earth. It makes no sense.
And it's like y'all said, it's not like he's hurting people. Like, it's not like he's failing at helping people. He's doing the right thing every time.
He's successful. He successfully saves that whole bus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that, Evan? You
no
said
one
I had
gets
something on my
hurt. He
face?
saves that bully kid that he becomes friends with. Like,
You said I had something on my face, Evan?
Did I say that? How long are you waiting to do that?
Is it gone? Oh,
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
How long were you waiting to do that?
For like the past 30 minutes. I forgot I didn't show it off.
Shirt.
Yeah, I've been stretching, but it's just been cutting off up here. I forgot to show it at the
we're not
beginning.
seeing it, but now we see it, and I love it. Should be the thumbnail. Should just be
thumbnail.
covering your face.
I don't even know if you guys could see it fully, but
No, you can see it fully when you did that. To go back to what we were saying, so if this is Superman's origin story, like I was thinking about comparing it to Batman and Spider-Man. Like we have very clear moments in those base level origin story. Like Bruce Wayne becomes Batman because his parents are killed in a wanton act of violence. Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man because Uncle Ben dies and Uncle Ben says, great power, great responsibility. We all like get the origin there. I don't know the comic origins for Superman, but if this story is about, like, if his journey in this, if the theme of it is him deciding to help humanity, because I think he does come around to that at some point, but I don't quite see why. Like, I think the moment he decides to is when he's, like, floating out of the spaceship and Jor-El says, you can save all of them.
You can save them all, yeah.
Yeah, so I can see that, like, that is the beat where that happens, but there's nothing, like, I don't understand why he's doing it then.
Well, it's because Jesus is out of the ship, so.
Yeah,
also, he's got to save Lois.
But his dad says you can save all of them. I feel like they tried, and so my topic was flashbacks and backstory and how I think this movie misuses them. I think there was enough time. We have enough scenes to give us, like, backstory and understand who Clark is. What we don't have is the right scenes. If Pa Kent is supposed to be a big figure in his life, then, like, even if he dies, and again, I don't know what other versions of this story, how they approach it, but if Pa Kent and his mom also, like, taught him to be selfless and to help people in just, you know, regular everyday ways, then it would make sense when he decides to come out as Superman that he's doing the same thing on a larger scale. I feel like that's an approach you can take to Peter Parker as well, where, like, he is a good person who will do the responsible thing, and then he continues that when he becomes more powerful and able to do it on a larger scale. The way that this uses flashbacks, though, I feel like is very weak. I think it's trying to be Batman Begins, especially, like, Nolan was involved in this, and David Goyer also wrote Batman Begins, and I think they're trying to do the same thing there. But in Batman Begins, every scene that we see with Bruce as a kid or as a young adult informs who he is in present day. It's telling us, like, something about how he came to have the values that he has, or, like, some of his missteps, like when he's going to kill Joe Chill, the guy who killed his parents, like, and he ends up not doing that. That informs us about who he is, and, like, we see him have his moment where he decides he won't use guns and he won't kill people. That's an important beat to show us. I don't feel like we get that really from the flashbacks here. I think if you just told the same beats linearly, they still aren't strong scenes. But if you just showed them in chronological order, I think there would be less of a problem. So the scene I mostly wanted to talk about with this, I think Angel brought it up before.
Bully scene?
Yeah, the bully scene. So, also, we don't really understand why he's being bullied, but I can kind of set that aside and let that
he's the main character.
Yeah,
Right.
and why
He's
in
the
front
main
of his
character.
father? His father is right there.
Yeah.
Why? Who does that?
Also, the bullying scene on the bus was so stupid. He's like, "You see the game last night, nerd?" Like, what is this?
We his girlfriend. Shut up.
That's what he gets. He gets older and then starts working at IHOP. That's what he gets.
Apparently.
I like the subtle nuance of he
kidding.
saved his life, and now they're clearly friends because he helps him up.
Yeah.
This bully kid.
So I'll let that be, because that's just standard cringe bullying scenes in movies, which I feel like come up a lot. But anyway,
I wouldn't want to fight me neither.
I wouldn't. Yeah, they position that scene where, so there's the flashback where the kids are, like, kind of, like, pushing him around and beating him up, and then they walk away, and Pa Kent comes over, and Clark says, "I wanted to hurt them," and that scene is positioned right after Zod arrives. So I paused and made a note of that when it happened, because I was like, okay, I feel like there's only two ways to interpret that scene. One, they're just not connected. Like, I feel like by positioning those scenes next to each other, there's a suggestion that they are in conversation. That flashback is informing what Clark is thinking about, what experiences he's drawing on now that Zod is here. So I feel like the only way to connect those two scenes is like, so, okay, he wanted to get back at the people bullying him as a kid, and he wanted to, like, beat him up. So now Zod's here, and I guess he can do that in a way that he couldn't as a kid. But Zod
is a bully.
But he is a little bit like there's something there, but not really. It's not really a parallel situation. So
it's not the same dynamic. You're right. It's
really not.
Like, it's a very different dynamic.
Yeah, I wish I could remember like another instance of a flashback doing something like that where there is a parallel scene. I know I've seen examples. I'm just not thinking of any.
What if he smacked him on the back of the head and said, "Where'd you grow up, nerd, on a farm?"
I mean, you could even do that visually. Like, and I think they even try to like they intro the a couple of the flashbacks. Well, I think the one with the bus, he like is walking through like that fishing town or whatever that he ends up in as an adult early on. And there's a school bus that drives by, and then it shows the school bus flashback. So it was like, okay,
which is cool. I like that.
There's a nice little visual transition that's very like A+ screenwriting 1 assignment, sure. But those scenes don't relate to each other. Showing us that scene then, there's no real reason to.
This is about hiding himself. Because he had just, was it the oil rig he had just come from?
Yeah, he just saved all those people on the oil rig. So this is
it's
also
about
him
hiding
saving
himself.
people.
I think we get another flashback in between, though. I think we get the one where
that's the thing. There's a scene to separate them. I don't remember what it is, but there is one, for sure. Because there's a scene to separate them, then we watch him run out and steal clothes because he has to, because, he doesn't have a shirt on.
In most of those cases, like, I don't think the flashbacks are really informing us about who he is now.
You know where that would have gone better? I don't know. I think it just fits better. I don't even know if that flashback scene really belongs, like, in this movie. I don't...
The bullying scene?
One. The bullying
one. I don't think it does either.
But I think it would have fit better theme-wise with... Nope, I lost it.
With Batman v Superman, maybe?
No. It's a scene in this movie.
It's a scene in the movie. Are you thinking of the scene in the bar?
Yes, thank you. Yes, the bar scene.
Okay.
I was thinking the same thing. If that
had
been before the bar, that would have worked so much better.
Mm-hmm. If they wanted to use it.
Because I think it would have shown balance. He can avoid conflict, but he can balance it by, like, that doesn't mean he has to take everything lying down because he destroys that guy's truck. Yeah, I like that.
And maybe there was an earlier draft or cut where they did that. Maybe there was some studio note where they decided to shuffle that around for some reason. To close this out, my final note with this is I think this just breaks the cardinal rule of backstory, which is that whatever backstory you tell us about your character, whatever past that you show us of them, has to inform who they are in the present. And I don't think this does that successfully. To bring it into how it uses flashbacks as well, I feel like there are really only two ways that you can do a flashback. One is like we're shown a scene and there's something like intriguing, there's some kind of hook, but we don't quite understand its significance now. You do that with any like 6 weeks earlier type of thing, which is a little bit of a trope. But like the way you do that is you're showing us something. Inception opens like this. You see what ends up kind of being the end of the movie where...
In medias res.
Yeah. Well, it's not really in media res, but you see Cobb showing up to old Saito and they exchange a couple lines and it's just kind of like drawing you in, but you don't know what it means yet. And then you get to it later and it puts it in context.
It recontextualizes later, yeah.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. The other way is the one I was talking about before, where you put these two scenes next to each other because they are in conversation somehow. Showing this flashback tells us what this character is thinking, or like what part of their value system or personality or something is coming into play in the present. I've used this example before, and I'll try not to send us down too far with this, but I always feel like the best comparison of good and bad backstory is in the Boondocks with Granddad and Uncle Ruckus, because I feel like every bit of like flashback we have with Granddad doesn't really tell us anything about him. It's just usually like played for a laugh. Every time we learn something about Uncle Ruckus, like every time we see a flashback with him, it's like, oh, you kind of get it. Like you understand why he becomes the way he is.
Yeah, you
And
don't excuse it, but you get it.
Which
You
is
don't
funny because
excuse it,
he's
but
pegged. I feel like he's pegged more as the comic relief character out of the two of them.
yeah,
If they're
but you
going
could
for
do it with both.
that.
I don't know what good backstory for Granddad in that show would be, but I just like to point to it as an example because it's two characters from the same thing, and I feel like one does exactly what flashbacks and backstory should do, and the other, I feel like what we get here is Granddad flashbacks. It's
Guess
just
I'll
like
rewatch the Boondocks again for like the 6th, 7th time.
It's so
Six.
good.
no reason to not rewatch the Boondocks, except season 4. But
Yeah, I skipped season 4. I just go 1 through 3.
But I feel like the flashbacks here are just like the same thing. Like anytime we see Granddad, it's like, oh yeah, he was also at this like civil rights protest and didn't do anything. I guess maybe the flashbacks here aren't quite that bland or
Pointless?
pointless. Yeah. I mean, in that show, at the very
They're
least,
making
it's usually,
individual
like,
points,
a
I think.
joke. I mean, I
But
think
they're
there's
not in conversation with each other like you were saying. Like they need to work together to create a cohesive whole, but they don't.
they just kind of have the shape of like telling us who he is. It feels like we're learning about him, but I feel like they don't quite go all the way there. They get like 2/3 of the way to telling us something, and then there's just no characterizing moment in them.
Also, this is off topic. I'm sorry. But the General being Martian Manhunter,
I was gonna bring that up.
It means nothing.
Yeah,
in what world does it make sense for him to remain in his disguise as the world is ending?
It doesn't.
that retcon makes no sense.
It's a retcon too. He's definitely not Martian Manhunter in this.
No way is he Martian Manhunter in this. I don't even know anything about Martian Manhunter, but I'm like, nope, this dude is just.
It's
a
not
dude.
him. They do
He's
something
just an
similar on
army
Supergirl,
guy.
actually. Like, to spoil a little bit of Supergirl, it's like an early reveal, essentially, that a character that you're following in a similar position is Martian Manhunter also. But they do it, I feel like, a lot so they can trick you into thinking that he's a different character, and then he's not. And again, they also don't really follow through with him on that. They have a real problem, I feel like, following through on Martian Manhunter outside of the Justice League cartoon. Like, he's a rich character with a lot of cool stuff to do, and they just never do anything. It feels like they insert him into
Young
stuff when they want
Justice.
something cool. Young Justice, yeah. I'm rewatching that recently, and
They
they
do
give
well.
him nothing to do.
Well, him specifically. The Martians in general, they give a lot to do. Like, there's a whole.
Well, they
Thing
give
about
Myth
him,
Martian
but-
a whole lot. They
Yeah.
give they have stuff in the later seasons too with like her parents and things like that. Like the Martians themselves get a lot of expansion. Martian
not
Manhunter
him,
as a character does not.
That was the end of my notes. So if we wanted to move on to
I had one funny observation that I think we've talked about before. Going back to the tornado scene, I think that it is hilarious that setup makes no sense. He goes back to save the dog because his wife locked the dog in the car completely by accident. Not her fault. It just happened to happen. And they ran away without getting the dog out. He goes back to save the dog. Scene ends. There's another scene in between. Then, one scene later, we finally catch up with the present day in a way. We see Clark return to the farm, and there's a different dog. I think
I
that's
remember you texted
hilarious.
that, and I didn't even notice
I-
in the movie.
I think that is hilarious. It is an entirely different dog, and it doesn't seem, because he's played by Henry Cavill in both scenes, they could have easily had it be the same dog. It makes no sense that it's a different dog, which means they had to get two different dogs for two different scenes, I guess to imply that more time had passed than we thought.
Or they just have more than one dog, maybe.
Maybe it doesn't seem like that's the case because the dog follows the mom around. We only see this one dog. I just think it's funny.
You know what's also fun? It's the opposite of the save the cat thing, too. Like, not that it's a dog, but, like, he tells them not to save the dog.
Exactly.
Because
And then
he'll
he
save
saves
the
the dog, and it doesn't matter because then there's a different dog later anyway. So it's not even like we get to see, oh, she still has the dog. She still has companionship because he saved the dog. No.
And then, in a way, Pa Kent becomes the cat dog. And
The
then
cat
he
dog
tells
that
him
he
not
does
to
not
save,
save.
not to save him either. Even though in the beginning of the movie, the first thing we see the adult Superman do is save people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of that, like, the way that they do all of that feels very Nolan-inspired, so, I mean, hard to say exactly how much his role was on this movie, but if that's him, whoever made that decision, I think bad call, or at least it ended up bad. Maybe there were good versions of it in earlier drafts of the script that got rewritten.
Probably.
I'm
But
telling Nolan on you. I'm gonna call him after this.
I mean,
I
I'll
think
defend
it
him
was
on Tenet, so that
Yeah,
it'll
that's fair.
balance things out.
I think it was Caravan of Garbage who said it. They did an episode on this movie, and they essentially said like one of them I think had a theory that Nolan was actually approached to direct this,
I
after
think
the
he might
success
have
of the
been.
Batman trilogy, and he kind of just said no. But he's a producer, so there's a lot of Nolan influence on this. Jelani, you were saying he has a screenwriting credit at least. So even if he didn't write most of this, because David S. Goyer wrote this, and he does a lot of superhero stuff, like he did Batman Begins also. He's really good at this, but it feels like a lot of this was like the studio reworking things to be more Nolan-y. And Nolan probably didn't want the level of like interference that he was going to get on this, and probably just said no. That's my theory.
And he was probably working on Interstellar by this point, because like this
That's true.
movie came out in the middle of like a very big run of movies that he was doing in a fairly short period of time.
Yeah, he's probably tired of doing superhero stuff, dude. He just did 3 Batman movies in a row.
Yeah. Well, he's also gone on record saying like he doesn't like other superheroes as much because they like he enjoys Batman for his groundedness. It also always surprises me that him and Zack Snyder are apparently like friends in real life. Although by all accounts Zack Snyder's a good dude, but like I just say that because their approaches to filmmaking are so opposite to each other, and it's
Gunn's
strange.
also a friend of Zach.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me either, but
Yeah,
like
no, he totally is too. And I could see that pairing more. Because they both have fun with a lot of their movies, I feel like. And not that Nolan doesn't, but they are a little more bombastic in their fun.
it's just strange to me that they're paired together creatively, and it's not like super closely paired, but like they're producers on each other's projects in a couple of cases, and it's just strange to me because they like their individual projects seem like they have completely different storytelling philosophies.
So yeah, so my topic is so I called it hollow world building, but I want to be clear that I don't think that every bit of world build I'm confused. What's the ha?
It's just like a hollow world,
Like in
like a
Godzilla
hollow
versus
earth.
Kong.
Oh,
Yeah.
my brain did not click on it. I thought you were making another Superman joke, and I got so confused.
No.
Anyway, I want to make very clear too, like, well, yes, a lot of my stuff is about the hollow world building on display here. I don't think that all of the world building is hollow, and I don't think that even the stuff that I'm going to talk about doesn't work in some capacity. What I mean by hollow world building is kind of what we've been talking about already. These ideas of things that when you start to look at them on the inside don't feel fully fleshed out. They don't necessarily feel like they've been thought all the way through, or there's enough holes in them that you could pick them apart if you wanted to. They're more like the frames of ideas than fully fleshed out ideas. And I think this is something that a lot of movies are guilty of. It's really not just Man of Steel. It's not even like just this as a Superman project. Like in general, there's a lot of projects with big characters like this that do take that approach where you can't necessarily get into everything, and because of that, stuff kind of gets left by the wayside. I think the biggest contributors to that in this case, though, are a lot of the locations, right? So, starting off with Krypton, because that's the beginning of the movie, obviously, we have that prologue on Krypton, and it seems like there's a lot going on. We have a whole 20 minutes on Krypton with Jor-El, and we get a lot of information very quickly about like there have been no natural births in centuries. They've kind of created this society, this Gattaca society, where they grow children for specific purposes, and all of that's really interesting. And it sets Clark up as this character that's like, well, the reason that he can be such a hero is because he's the first of his species in centuries to have any kind of choice. The issue with that particular world building, when you think about it, though, is that we're seeing them talk about that, but we're not seeing how it affects everyday citizens. We're not even seeing where anybody lives. It feels like Krypton is a lot of these giant skyscrapers that nobody lives in and that nobody does anything in. We don't even see something as simple as like a market that he's flying by on his little dragon thing while he's running away from like other things. We see a lot of conflict in what I assume is Zod's coup of the government, right? But we also don't see like Krypton breaking down until it happens. We hear a lot about that, and then all of a sudden it just suddenly happens like right after Jor-El dies and right after Clark is launched into space and they're about to like launch Zod away and all that. So again, we get a lot of these explanations and impressions of these ideas, but they're not fleshed out enough that we feel a lot in relation to them, especially when it comes to we don't know anything about Krypton as a place or its people. We don't really know anything about how this choice to make everybody these vat babies has actually contributed to the way that people's lives have turned out on this planet. If anything, there are moments that contradict it, like the fact that Jor-El takes out multiple armed soldiers by himself. Like, yes, you can train to do something like that, but we have been told, and the only information we have on him at this point is that he was trained to be a scientist and grown to be a scientist. And because they make that very important, it feels weird then that he is taking out multiple armed soldiers all at the same time. Like, the more times I watch it, the more I think about it, and the more it does kind of, like, take me out of it, right? Another location that's very important, I feel like, is Metropolis, which we have already talked about. Metropolis as a city is not very fleshed out. That also happens in a lot of Superman media. Even Superman Returns, we get Superman saving people. We get all these like scenes of him in Metropolis, and we see like the cool designs they have. But we don't really learn a lot about the city's culture, its relationship with Superman. And in this case, because this is his first time appearing anywhere, we're not going to get a lot of Metropolis until the next couple of movies. Right? We don't necessarily get a lot in those, but we're talking about this movie specifically. It's a little harder to criticize that, but I do think it contributes to how hard it is to connect with the people and all the destruction, because it looks and feels like a generic city, right? And I think building that stuff up is really important. I think the way that they could have maybe done more and saved this is the Smallville stuff, because we get a lot of Smallville, and a lot of the Smallville scenes we do get are meant to contribute a lot to Clark's character building, right? So we spend a lot of time in Smallville with him and his family, and then we have those scenes that we talked about don't connect because the way that they write Pa Kent is sort of inconsistent and doesn't necessarily always make a lot of sense. The flashbacks are very inconsistent, so we don't get a lot of an impression of, again, Clark's relationship with any of the people in this town outside of his parents. We know that he gets bullied, but we don't know why he's getting bullied. We don't see any of his friends, really. Like, we kind of know that he knows this one girl who's defending him. We know that he becomes friends with the kid who was initially bullying him, and then he's bullied by a different kid. But we don't see any of those personal moments figuring out why all of this is happening. And it also makes Smallville, in a lot of ways, feel very generic. And I don't know about you guys, but I felt like it would have then felt a little more dire that his home was being torn apart during this fight with the Kryptonians. You know, like he crashes through a lot of stuff, he breaks the IHOP into pieces, and I thought we were almost going to get a moment of like Pete recognizing him because he knows Clark and he's seen his face, but then they just kind of don't do that, and I think that would have been interesting, and it might have maybe like, even if they don't talk about it, that's another moment of world building that we could have had where it's like, well, maybe some of these people kind of suspect that it's him, but they don't let themselves think it out loud. You know what I mean? Because realistically, like, if you don't know Clark Kent personally, you're probably not going to know who he is. And that's also another good element of world building, too, where it's like, the people that are close to him might figure it out, but for the most part, like, he's not a public figure. He's not the president. He's not a mayor. No one's going to know. That's been a lot of my issues with a lot of these. Like I said, all of these ideas are really well set up. It's just there's not a lot of follow through. And I don't know if you guys have any points if you want to jump in at all.
I don't feel the lack there. And maybe that's because I've only seen this twice. I think the place that it would have counted the most that you talked about was Smallville. Like, if this is his home, then maybe he would feel a little bit more about that. The other two, I don't feel like we need to have them be more fleshed out. With Krypton, maybe it's just that we spend longer there than we need to, and there's a couple of questions that are raised, but I'm not gonna like invalidate your feeling that this is thin, and I don't think it's especially like deep world building, but I don't feel that as a problem from my own experience.
I'm kind of in the same boat as Evan. I understand what you're saying, and like Evan said, I'm not here to invalidate that, but I could see why that's wanted. That's definitely been wanted out of Metropolis, I've heard. And with Guns coming out, it looks like he's leaning into that too. I don't think it was needed as much for Krypton. I just don't think we needed to stay on Krypton for 20 damn minutes.
Yeah. It does look nice.
Personally.
I don't mind, but and that could have been 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It really could have been, and I think that's the whole thing, is because we spend so much time there, I think there's the impression that we needed more, because of how much time we spend there, we did need more we needed
It's
more use of
inefficient.
the time to justify 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because we don't really need to learn anything about Krypton because it blows up at the end of that sequence, so it doesn't matter.
There's not even
Yeah.
green on the planet, but kryptonite is green.
Yeah.
Let me just go change my rating. 1 out of 5.
Well, so they weren't going to do kryptonite. There's actually a reason for that. They weren't going to do kryptonite. They were going to have the whole atmosphere difference thing. That was going to be his weakness. They added in kryptonite in BVS, I think because people wanted it, or somebody asked them to. So initially, they weren't going to do kryptonite at all. So that's kind of why that's the case, I think.
Yeah.
Was the phrase, "Oh, that's my kryptonite," before Superman, or was it because of Superman?
I think it's because of it.
I'm pretty sure it was because of Superman.
It was like the one thing I knew about this character before seeing it, mostly because of the Three Doors Down song, Kryptonite.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know how to feel about that.
do you know that song?
No.
Okay.
But
How do you not know that song?
Angel, I don't know how many of these this might be your first time witnessing it. There are many songs that I mentioned that I'm sure Jelani has heard at some point in his life because just he's been to.
You have heard kryptonite.
You've heard
There's no
Kryptonite
way.
at some point. You might not know that you've heard it, but like you were alive in 2001. That song would have played in
When I
your
was
vicinity
4?
at some point.
You think I have memories of when I was 4?
I mean, I do, but I don't always expect that other people do.
What?
It's actually less common than you think, actually.
Yeah. Anyway, you've heard Kryptonite by Three Doors Down. Audience, please back me up on this because every time this happens, I feel like I'm going
Don't just
crazy.
skip past that. How do you have memories from when you were 4?
I think
I have
because
memories from
moving.
when I was 3.
I think it's mostly because of moving.
Moving.
Because I can compartmentalize stuff into places, so I think it sticks around a little better.
I don't remember what I had for dinner yesterday, guys.
Well, I guess that's on you.
I think that another part of the world building is like the character stuff. And again, we started to touch on this. I think that another thing they don't, and this could inform why maybe like it doesn't necessarily seem necessary to build out these places, is because the way that they're approaching building this character, there's a distance from Clark that we don't necessarily see in other media. Like we get a lot more personal stuff in stuff like the animated series and like My Adventures with Superman and like the original Superman movie from '78. And we don't get as much of that here. It's a lot more from other people's perspective, like Lois. It's a lot more through these like interspersed flashbacks when we get a lot of the personal stuff with him. We see a lot of like, him approaching the military, flying, and stuff like that. So
Well, his
we don't
opening
see him-
scene, like the first scene with adult Clark, is not even really in his point of view. Like most
Yeah,
of the
no.
shots with him in it, aside from like I think there's one shot that's like a close up when he's jumping off the boat, and then we get a close up of his abs because Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill.
Yeah, why was he shirtless while saving those people? I thought maybe it was to swim faster, but I don't think Superman needs that.
Probably some. I mean, it's
Well, because
But he
the
was very
shirt,
shirtless.
you see the shirt, and that's why.
okay.
Okay.
I thought you were gonna
I
say
kind of
like the
understand.
shirt is a metaphor for something, and him removing it is, and his abs are metaphorical.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Aliens have more abs than most humans. I don't know if you know that, but they all have abs. If you've seen Prometheus,
Oh yeah, bro has
Yeah.
some abs.
he had like a 12-pack. That was insane. But
The
anyway,
shirt is a metaphor.
and that was the end of that point.
Honestly, that was kind of the Green Knight, though. It's like the axe is a metaphor. Ah, yes. Of what? And then it leaves it at that.
Yes.
To validate some of what you're saying, like I don't think this is as much of a problem. I do think like between the characterization and some of what you're talking about with the world building, like there could have been more. I also don't think like I've been thinking a lot because of the Mission Impossible video that I made about like prioritizing certain things in your story and looking at like what did these people prioritize, and it seems like world building was a pretty low priority for them, and I think that's okay. If you feel the lack, that's understandable, but I think it's okay that they didn't try. If characterizing Clark was something that they tried to do, and it does seem like they tried, the fact that they don't do that, like, I've started to be a little bit more forgiving of when, like, certain areas of a movie are lacking, as long as other ones are good. If you bring your A game to some part of it, then it's like, okay, that's all right. If some other thing falls off a little bit. I think John Wick movies are one of the best examples of this. It's like pretty thin stories, but some amazing action scenes. So, like...
And decent world building.
I would say some good characterization, too, for John specifically.
Yeah, but there's, he's not a terribly complex character. I think creatively, they know what they want to prioritize and what they're willing to leave by the wayside, but they deliver on it. And I think that is something where that this movie is lacking. They give the impression that they are trying to characterize Clark, and they have a lot of thematic sounding lines, but then we don't really know who Clark is by the end, and the theme feels a little confused. They kind of set this expectation that, like, all right, we're at least going to do this, and then they don't really do that. So even if world building is a bit of a lower priority, maybe you feel that lack a bit because these other parts that they are trying for are also kind of falling flat. I don't want to speak too much for you, know what it is, too? It's maybe
no, but I agree with you. I honestly think that a lot of it is, too, because, like, in my head, the way I was approaching is, like, proper world building can inform character.
Yes,
and I think
and should.
And I think that they would have had a better time characterizing Clark. Because, like I said, this is not the biggest thing for me either. Like, I think we've talked about a lot of the bigger stuff for me, which really is the characterization. Because there's such a distance from Clark at the beginning, and they also don't flesh out his relationships with other people, but also the people that he's supposed to be saving. Like, if they had built some of that out a little bit more, I think it would have worked. They have a lot of themes set up, like you were saying, without actually following through. So the main theme is set up on Krypton. It's set up really, really well. Even if it's slightly on the nose sometimes, I like the setup of, like, well, he's the first natural birth in centuries, and he's the first one he can save the world because he has a choice. And so the whole movie's going to be about him choosing to do this and choosing to save people, and not, listen to people who are telling him that he can't do that. But the follow-through is not necessarily always there, because they're approaching so many of these scenes from other characters' perspective. And I think there's a way to do that that can be really interesting. I think, honestly, if they wanted to do a Superman movie that was mostly from Lois Lane's perspective, I think that would be super interesting. Right? Like,
they kind of have to do it here, but it doesn't deliver.
They have to do it. They do it for half the movie, but then they switch to Clark, and because we haven't connected with this version of Clark yet, it doesn't feel right. It feels like two different movies trying to blend together. Had they done a little bit more of the building out, at least the locations. Like, because again, they're giving us so much Krypton without really giving us anything of substance, all to set up themes that they also don't follow through on. So they're setting things up to be important that just aren't.
Yeah.
Which is kind of my main point. They're creating these scenarios to, like, give depth, but they don't give us the actual depth, because they spend time on other things that are cool and interesting and fun, but they don't necessarily, like, you can't, like, set this up as a character movie, but then not follow through on all the character stuff you need to do. Like, that should be sort of your focus, if that's the approach you want to take.
Agree. I do want to validate, like, I think I see you on the, like, they could have tied in some world building to help characterize him better. That's a missed opportunity. I think it just took me a little bit to see where you were going with that.
It is nothing else. For world building, let's move on to predictions for Superman 2025. Last topic.
Cool. Who wants to go first?
I'm going first. I'm
Please.
taking over. I think Gunn can do it. Bro is like 6 for 6 on the superhero stuff he's made. I've never seen Super, though, and I've never technically seen Brightburn, but I've seen videos on it, as I said before. Also, there's no way it doesn't make its money back, whatever that amount may be. There's no clear number right now. Some are saying 180 mil was the budget. There was a rumor it was 363 million. Gunn denied that, though.
I don't know. That's a lot.
Yeah, Gunn denied it. Also, there's clearly no superhero fatigue whatsoever. The teaser trailer itself has 58 million views, and I'm half of those. It also has 1.2 million likes, so at the very least, you could say there's interest. The official full trailer that came out 10 days ago, as of this recording, has 28 million views, 510,000 likes.
I actually watched it again this morning.
Yeah, I should have before this. I should have watched both. Also, I think Gunn knows the stigma that comes with Superman right now. So the very first things we see him, I think he's trying to humanize him. Very first time we see him, he's bleeding, barely breathing. And that's in the first shot of the teaser trailer. First thing we see him do is save a little girl. First thing we see him do in the full official trailer is arguing, getting mad because he's not operating by the government. He has emotions, and he was just trying to save people. As he said, people were going to die. I like this. I like that he is very clearly trying to humanize Superman in the first impressions, the first shots we see of him in the stuff leading up to the movie. So I for damn sure think it's going to be a hit.
To go back to one of your points, I think we both had the same nervousness that people were going to think that because of that argument scene, and that being one of the first times that we see Clark really speaking as this version, that people were going to mischaracterize him before they saw the movie and think, oh, he's going to be like this the whole time, and take that as like, oh, he's just going to be whiny all the time and like constantly complaining. It's like,
Angry.
and I know that because I had a split second moment of like, is this how they're characterizing him? And then my immediate thought was, no, of course it's not. That's not the way. That's not what they're going for. They're showing a more human side than we get to a lot of versions of Superman. They're not going with necessarily the safe route of that. They're giving us those really important moments of Clark Kent in some ways feeling overwhelmed by the role of Superman. And that's one of these moments. You know, he thought that this would be a good interview that would help him, you know, reach out to the people. At least that's my impression. And then Lois did her...
It's also characterizing her.
It's characterizing her. It's showing, like, she's not holding back because, like, to her, this is not only her job, but it's important. And it's important that people ask the real questions of Superman, even if it's her doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because as far as this goes, she's a reporter. She's not his girlfriend in this moment. She's a reporter. She's separating that and asking him real questions that any other reporter would also ask him. To me, that makes me think that they're going for sort of the characterization stuff that doesn't always follow through in Man of Steel, right? Is that they're going for the most emotionally resonant form of Superman that they can, making it, you know, a story about Clark Kent before it's a story about the symbol that is Superman.
Right.
I had heard that James Gunn wants this to be a world that feels very lived in, and I think that that's very evident by the amount of stuff we have going on. Stuff that normally would worry me, because I'm like, oh, there's so much going on. They've got the Authority, which is another superhero team's going to pop up. There's a Justice League. You know, you not only have Lex Luthor, but Maxwell Lord is supposed to be a character too. I think he runs this sort of Justice team or whatever. There's Metamorpho, yeah. There's so many characters, all of which are very complex characters, very complicated backstories. You know, so it's like there's the danger of something that is too much going on. But I think that that is what the DC universe looks like. And I think the key is what you're focusing the writing on, and focusing on like which of these characters can we just get a hint of, and which of these characters is actually important. I think that given that Green Lantern Guy Gardner is, I think, being portrayed as the leader of this team, he's probably going to have somewhat of a relationship with Superman in the film, even if it's not like one of the main relationships. But he's clearly going to be important, and you can focus on that and then expand on the rest of them in other movies. You know, and I think you have
He's
a lot
in
of good
Peacemaker
performers.
season 2.
He is in Peacemaker season 2, which is making me realize I need to finish Peacemaker season 1 so that I can watch season 2.
Yeah, what?
I know, I just haven't gotten to it. I got through one episode and I really liked it, and I got through, I think, 2 episodes of Creature Commandos, and I did not like it.
I mean,
at
that's
least
fair.
not what I saw. Like, I didn't love it, and it worried me because that's the first taste of this universe. And I'm like, the jokes weren't landing. It felt a lot like the Suicide Squad, like the same thing. I wasn't a fan. But I don't think that Superman's going to have this issue. I think it's going to be a very different thing.
No, because Superman, technically Creature Commandos is the start of this verse, but I don't think people not resonating with it is the worst thing, because it's not what the general public are going to be introduced to as far as this verse goes. Like, I don't think my parents know that Creature Commandos even exists, so that's
Probably
not a problem.
not.
But I've shared these trailers with them. They know this is coming. I'm actually going to be seeing it in San Diego. I wanted to see it with my brother here in Jersey, but I'll be with my mom in San Diego when this comes out. Yeah, it's a very lived-in world. I'm not really nervous about the number of characters or anything, because if they're not discussed or super fleshed out in this movie, one, Gunn already does a great job with supporting cast anyway.
He has a track record for that. I think he can handle a lot of characters, yeah.
He handles ensembles really well, and he can even handle, like, focusing on a central character to not making it too much of an ensemble. Like, because even Guardians is a good example of, it's very much a Peter Quill story, the first one, even though there's a lot of other characters that have a lot of other things going on and have their own side stories. Like, it never feels like it loses focus. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen here.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about the world. I like the idea that it's already lived in. Like, we're not getting... I'm not going to say it's not going to be an origin movie, because I think in this movie he's debuting as Superman, which is fine. We're not starting from, like, ground zero with this world. Like, oh, there's never been anybody who can ever do anything spectacular before in this world. Like, how would the world react type of thing.
It's not like he's the first or only one, like in Man of Steel, where, in a way, he's got to do a lot of the heavy lifting. It also feels like...
Well, there was Martian Manhunter.
Established. There was Martian Manhunter. But his superpower was being a general. That was his superpower that he used. He didn't use any of his other superpowers.
His superpower was doing nothing. See, that's a son that Pa Kent could be proud of. Martian Manhunter doesn't let anyone know who he is so well. He gets into his late 40s without anyone knowing.
He's like, shapeshifting isn't even one of my powers. I got surgery and I made myself look like this.
Yeah. I'm so excited. I'm going to see it once in San Diego, and then I know I'm going to see it again with I wanted to originally watch it with my brother for the first time, but I can't do anything about when my mom bought the plane ticket. So I'll watch it.
That's true.
I'll watch it again when I come back from that with my brother. So I'm seeing it at least twice.
Yeah, I probably am too. Definitely seeing it opening weekend no matter what happens. I just don't know if I'm going to see it after that in theaters again. I guess it kind of depends. I've done that with a few movies. Like, I did that with Black Panther. I saw that, like, 3 times in the theater.
I'm definitely the least excited of the three of us. Mostly because I think James Gunn is a good pick for this. I think he will do a good job. I have plenty of faith in him and his directing abilities, and I think he'll treat the character, like, with respect. But I have not enjoyed any James Gunn movie that I have seen. He's 0 for 3 with me. I am one of the 4 people in the world who doesn't like Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm not expecting to hate it, but I'm expecting a 5 out of 10. Maybe 6 if he does a good job.
Evan, I know this is your show. You created it. You're not allowed on the episode, bro. You're not allowed.
Superman Legacy?
You're not allowed. But it's not Legacy. It's just
Superman.
Yeah.
Regular
Sorry,
Superman.
I forgot that it's not called Legacy.
Yeah, you're not allowed. I'm sorry, bro. It's just going to be me and
It'll
Angel.
save me a little bit of money.
I'm cool with that. Well, listen, to defend you a little bit, out of James Gunn movies, I mostly just like Guardians of the Galaxy. I do think he's a little overrated in some capacities. I don't know that he's the right pick to do this whole universe. I think this movie might be good individually. I do not know about the rest. I don't know that he can be their Feige.
I've never doubted his ability, like, in disliking the stuff that I've seen from him. I have nothing bad to say about his, like, technical chops. I think he's a perfectly competent director. I think he will show more restraint. I think he'll probably work better within restrictions than Snyder did with this, or several other directors. Like, does he have, like, the track record to show that he can handle an entire DCEU? Hard to say, but then again, who has that track record? I think he's made enough good, like, or at least what are considered, like, well-received movies for Marvel and the Suicide Squad. Like, he's a good pick for this. I just don't expect that I'm going to enjoy it, because I generally haven't. If I like this movie, it will be a surprise. I'll also be surprised if I hate it. I don't expect that I'm going to hate it.
Better not.
Yeah.
But, well, I mean, let's see what he has. But
no, you're legally not allowed to. It's in your contract.
the trailers are good, but that's also like, I mean, we talked about in the trailers episode, like a good trailer is just a good trailer.
That's true. I mean, Man of Steel has some of the best trailers ever, and we have criticisms. We like the movie, but we have criticisms.
Yes, and
Totally
the
fair.
trailer is whatever you think about the movie, the trailer is better. I am curious to see like what are they going to do in terms of, because they've kind of been talking about like this is going to relaunch the DCEU, and at this point DC might as well make its tagline like better by comparison. That's basically been their bread and butter. They've just, all right, we did something the first time, well that didn't work, but I guess we can just do it again and better this time. So maybe
It's feeling
it'll
like a Thunderbolts
maybe it'll work for
conversation.
him again. My like main prediction for the movie itself, I think it's going to be a more wholesome, traditionally heroic version of Superman. I think he's gonna. One of you, I think, kind of alluded to this, but I think he's gonna shy away from the kind of like stoic, unsmiling version of Superman that Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill did here. I think he's gonna make him much more, maybe not dorky, but wholesome. And I agree with what you were saying, Jelani, about like them trying to humanize him. That overwhelmingly seems to be what they're trying to get across in the trailers. We'll see what my rating is when it comes out, but I'm going in with pretty measured expectations.
I think the skepticism is fair. You know,
It's not even really skepticism. Like, I'm not going to probably try to take this from anyone. I just don't think it's going to work for me because James Gunn just doesn't typically. I feel the same thing about David Eggers movies. Like, he's not like a hard 0 for 3, but I haven't liked any of them. But I'm just like, yeah, I'm glad he has a career. And like, I'm glad that he gets to make movies for the people who like them. And that's probably what I'm going to think about this James Gunn universe. It's not going to be for me, but I'm glad other people will get to enjoy it. That's good. Chelani, you seem like that's not enough for you.
he's trying to use his heat vision.
Yeah, it's not working right now.
Okay. Well,
Must be kryptonite nearby or something.
Yeah.
must be.
So I'm looking up also, like, James Gunn doesn't have a long directing record. He has a lot of writing and producing, but he doesn't have a long directing record. His main directing things are the Guardians movies, the Suicide Squad, all of which I have liked. He's directing this.
He's been doing it for 15 years. I think Super was.
He's been doing it for a long
2010.
time.
That's
Like, he's been in the film
enough.
business. I think as a creative, he's been doing this for a really long time. But as far I didn't realize that this is one of his few directing things. The only ones that I haven't seen are Super and Slither.
I saw Slither.
Yeah, and I've heard Super is good.
I think he's got the track record. I'm not worried about his resume.
Between writing these movies, plotting out the DCU, attending interviews, and debunking rumors online, and then like also doing photo ops and promo stuff, I don't know when he sleeps.
That's true.
He does a lot. I'm pretty sure he's been gone on record saying he sleeps, he rests well. Like, I don't know how though. Like, I wake up tired, bro. You got a lot under his plate.
Maybe take some good melatonin.
I don't understand what the stuff in black people's skin has to do with this, Evan.
That's melanin. I do sometimes get those confused, but I'm pretty sure I got that right this time.
I think you did. I think you did get it right. Melatonin is the sleep one.
Yeah, he did. I'm just playing.
So, as we've been saying, our next episode, whenever you guys hear this, will be Superman Legacy. After that, I'm not sure, because we're recording this about a month before it's probably going to come out. So I'm not sure what our schedule's going to look like after that. But all of you here will probably be seeing Superman, so that'll be next.
If you don't see Evan, you know why.
I guess so. I'm gonna see it. I'm willing to. I mean, hell, I've made you watch The Green Knight. If you can get through that, I think I can stomach whatever. I don't expect it's gonna be nearly as bad for me as The Green Knight was for you. So I'll tough it out, whatever that ends up looking like. But I'm only seeing it once. I'm not going twice. We have our YouTube channel. I have put out a video essay on Mission Impossible recently as of recording this. It will have been out for a while by the time you guys hear this. There will probably also be a ranking video of all 8 movies by that time. We have our Patreon. We're on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. Well, I'm on Letterboxd at ev_Wes and all those platforms. The podcast is at INT Analysis Pod on Instagram and Blue Sky. Where are you guys at? And Angel, don't let me skip you this time like I did last episode.
Oh, I forgot about that. I forgot about how I was Oscar snubbed by our very
Yeah.
own Evan Westman.
Cancel me.
Instagram Jelani T. Kelly, YouTube Jelani T. Kelly, Actors Access Jelani T. Kelly. I want to share it because this has never happened to me before. I don't know why it's happening now, but it's awesome. I've been tracking my auditions that I've received since April 30th. I haven't booked anything just yet, but I have 35 auditions to date that I've done. Today is May 24th.
So 35
Wow.
in the last 24 days?
Within less than 30 days, I've got
Congrats.
Nice.
35
Jeez.
auditions.
It's amazing.
That is a good sign.
So, it's a good sign. That's dope. I'm grateful and all. I would love to book some work from them.
Agree.
But so if you guys want to hire me, clearly, I'm wanted enough.
In demand.
I'm highly in demand, guys. Get me while I have the time. Who knows where my time's gonna go soon enough? Angel.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were done.
I think that pause is long enough.
You sounded like you had a whole speech going. Instagram at AngelsArc15. I'm on Letterboxd at Serenity Cinema. I'm trying to post more on Letterboxd than I have been lately, like as in actually posting reviews, because I've mostly just been logging my movies and but I want to do more reviews and more lists. I'll definitely be doing one for.
You should.
Are you not on Letterboxd?
He is not.
Have we talked about this?
I'm afraid to publicly rate movies because I might be working with some of these people. So.
But you should. Whoever's here clearly listens to your opinions, as do we. We'd love to read it.
That's why I'm also very careful about what I say on here.
I'm willing to take
That's
that
fair.
risk, I guess. I like doing
Yeah,
it too
I am
much
too.
to stop.
I am too. I don't say anything super harsh or critical necessarily, but I state my opinion
Yeah.
pretty clearly.
You can also just mark stuff as watched. You don't you can say that you saw
That's
it without
true.
rating it. That's
You
an
don't
option,
have to do
so.
a review. I do it sometimes, but I haven't been as much lately. I just mark it as watched and I put the rating, but you don't have to do that either. You can just track what you watch.
That would be good to track that.
Get on there. Did you run through all your socials? I don't want to.
Yeah,
cut you
those are
off
the main
early.
socials that I plug.
Give us
so
more
we're
just
good.
to make up for last time. Do you have a Pinterest?
Are you on Yik
Facebook?
Yak? Yik Yak.
What the hell is Yik Yak?
It is a real
Kick-
thing. I don't know if
You
it's
guys
still
make
around.
me feel so old sometimes. I don't know if you all
Vine.
know, but I'm the oldest
Vine.
person here.
Reddit?
But we know
Oh,
you're
I've
on
heard of
Reddit.
Vine. I know what Vine is. I didn't have one,
Threads.
but I know what Vine is. My
X, if you
socials
still
are
have it.
Instagram and YouTube, and that's all I got really.
You got a resume on Indeed or LinkedIn you want to plug?
Yeah,
Like,
LinkedIn. How about MySpace?
I
MySpace?
do
Friendster.
actually. That's how I got my job. is Indeed. I also have my
Nobody gets
resume
stuff through
etched into
LinkedIn.
stone in some ancient temple somewhere.
That's where it needs to be. Jelani, that's where you gotta
Yeah.
start looking for auditions.
Yeah.
Stone temples.
That's how I got my audition as oldest podcast host.
I am so lost.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to end it.
Tiredness and the lack of food.
Oh, no, we ran through
It's been-
everything.
Jelani needs to eat, guys.
I
That's
need
what
to eat
this
as
is.
well. I've been hungry this whole recording. So
Yeah.
I
we'll
do
see you guys
too.
next time for Superman.